I will officially call this City Council meeting for the City of Lake Mills to order. This evening is September 9th, 2023. Misty, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Perler?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll ask everybody to rise as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next agenda item number 4 is Councilmember board reports and acceptance of meeting minutes. We'll be combining our board reports and council minutes at this point in the agenda moving forward, just for some efficiency. Tonight we only have the City Council regular meeting minutes from September 5th. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? No? Okay. Then we'll accept the City Council meeting minutes from September 5th, 2023 into the record. At this time, I'd like to ask the council for unanimous consent to move up agenda item 9D, which is the presentation of Meritorious Service Award to Officer Brandon Hanley. I'd like to move that directly after correspondence, which is next. Does anyone have an objection to that?
Would you like a motion to that point?
Do we need a motion or a vote, Drake?
You don't. As long as unanimous consent is accepted, you don't need a motion.
Okay, Mr. Waters, is that okay with you? Okay, he gave a thumbs up. So we'll move on to correspondence, and then we'll do that award quickly. So, Mr. Fields.
Got a little list here. Got an invite to tour Summer Ridge, the new apartments out there, so I'll be doing that tomorrow afternoon. Received a call from a constituent on Club 55, just looking for some of the history, background on it from what we've done with the forgivable loan in the past. Talked to a community member who approached me about some interaction with some city staff out of town. Emails on Club 55, email that we got on AI, the artificial intelligence. I got a couple emails on the pickleball courts, on Bartles Beach pedestrian bridge, what's going on with that and trying to save it. Invite to the Club 55, the annual meeting on the 27th of this month. Email on the dam and lake level, and I also received 2 more emails on the Rock Lake levels today, and then also 1 email on the Rock Lake from the Rock Lake Improvement Association. Update on water from them also.
Thank you. Mrs. Bishop.
Okay, I had much of the same, and I'm going to start off with I've had so many emails that if I have not gotten back to you personally, I'm working on it. I apologize. So I did have a luncheon with some citizens last Tuesday where we discussed a broad variety of issues, including the dam and lake levels, bike paths, trees, the future land use map, and general TAP grants and connectivity. And my emails also reflected a lot of those same topics. I had an email specifically about the dam and water levels from a citizen that was handwritten that I provided to the deputy clerk for distribution to the city council members. I received communications about pickleball courts. I received communication about the Sandy Beach project generally. I also received the invitation to the Summer Ridge grand opening tomorrow, which I will not be attending. I received communications also about the Bartles Beach pedestrian bridge, as well as the future of AI in municipal government. I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Quidnow.
So I had many of the same email correspondence. I'm trying to discern what was different. I did have some emails regarding Bartles Beach bridge repair concerns, which were handled very efficiently by the Parks and Recreation team. Good job. There was a lot of follow-up regarding the listening session that you and I attended. There was a citizen correspondence regarding pier construction and water levels, some correspondence regarding the ad hoc committee, I also was invited to the Summer Ridge on Thursday. Unfortunately, I will be at work. And about 3 emails regarding the water levels in Rock Lake. Did you want me to go over the listening session that we had as well?
Sure, if there's anything that we didn't also get any other topics
Right.
that maybe didn't get mentioned, I think there's a few, but yeah, if you want to try to go ahead. that'd be
Well, I
great.
would like to thank everyone who attended, or if they couldn't attend, found a way to communicate with us to attend and have your concerns listened to. Ms. Curler and I felt that it was a very positive interaction, and we intend on having another relatively soon, probably before Christmas. It's very important for citizens to be involved, and that kind of interaction with the citizens. I mean, we had 20 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you fit them all into the library, it's a lot. It was standing room only. So it was very, very welcoming to see everyone there, and though there may have been some people who were, they had their complaints, which is totally acceptable. I believe that everyone was there with good intent, and it was very, very wonderful to see everyone. That being said, the summary of what I think of the things that were handled that day were having to do with ADA compliance and accessibility downtown, Club 55 and our Rock Lake Activity Center. I apologize, I work with children, and so I've been sick. Use of the mill pond and what it should do for downtown. The Century Building, of course, is something that has come up very often. There was a question or concern regarding equity and board member presentation time when we have city council member or city council meetings, apologies. Huge support for pickleball. So, yeah, that's definitely something we're gonna have to keep our eyes on. Sandy Beach, discussion whether or not we need to have another meeting to talk about what those things look like. The use of consultants and reducing the need of the consultants, as well as the library expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Waters.
There we go. I was just taking notes on Ms. Quidnow. Thank you. Everything's been covered already, so good job, everyone, for mentioning the correspondence, and I'm all good.
Okay, and I had, I think, largely the same. Many of us received, we all received similar emails on a lot of issues. A couple other minor items that we heard about at the listening session were the utility bill box out back, animals at large, homeless people in the community, street reconstruction follow-up on West Lake Street. The sirens are too loud. Boards and committees were not involved enough in the strategic plan and should be used more. North Side development and speeding by the high schools, which one constituent raised as a concern and another individual said that's a 30-year-old problem. So I think that's probably always a concern. And I want to echo Ms. Quednow's statements that we really appreciated everybody who came and spoke with us at the library last Saturday, and or 2 Saturdays ago, and also those that reached out to us even though they couldn't attend. Okay. So next, we've agreed to move to item 9D on the agenda, and this is a presentation of a Meritorious Service Award to Officer Brandon Hanley. So I'll ask Officer Hanley and his family and Chief Schroeder to come up, please. And I think for us to hear you, you'll need to go to the podium.
Good evening. Before I present the award real quick while I have everyone captive, I just wanted to note a few significant anniversaries we have in the police department this year. Dispatcher Clerk Terry Hines reached her 10th anniversary earlier this year. Officer David Fritchie reached his 20th anniversary in August. Lieutenant Alan Whitty reached his 20th in September. And Officer Jessica Johnson will reach 25 years with the City of Lake Mills Police Department in October. So if you see those individuals, please thank them for their service. It's certainly, when we're talking about decades and or quarter centuries, it's quite significant that they've been here serving the community that long. Okay. Kind of hiding in the corner on me there. That's okay.
Not at all. Not at all.
So tonight I'd like to publicly recognize Officer Brandon Hanley for his efforts in seeking justice for one of our citizens. Last November, Officer Hanley responded to a call regarding the 16-year-old who reported repeated acts of sexual assault, which were perpetrated by her employer. Officer Hanley's investigation resulted in the arrest of the suspect for the alleged acts. The arrest was really just the beginning of the work that Officer Hanley did for the case. His investigation included obtaining the search warrant for the suspect's office and submitting evidence to the crime lab for DNA testing, sending preservation letters to Facebook and Snapchat for the suspect and victim's accounts, obtaining additional search warrants for the suspect's DNA, cell phones, payroll records, and Apple iCloud accounts, spending countless hours searching through the data that was obtained through the search warrants to find evidence that was related to the investigation, conducting countless interviews of potential witnesses, and much more. All of this on top of his regular patrol duties and duties as a canine handler. Officer Hanley approached each phase of the investigation with a desire to uncover the truth. After several months of motion hearings, the case was set for a jury trial. Officer Hanley was well prepared to testify at the jury trial, and he presented testimony to the jury in a professional and clear manner. The defendant was ultimately convicted on several felonies, including sexual intercourse with a child, exposing genitals to a child, child enticement, and soliciting a child for prostitution. After the trial, I received a letter. He doesn't know this, but I received a letter from Judge Brantmeyer, which I have for him now tonight as well, who presided over the trial. He wrote to commend Officer Hanley for the thoroughness of his investigation and how well he testified at the trial. I can tell you this is the first time in my law enforcement career that I've seen a judge take the time to write a letter to commend an officer for their testimony. Under our awards policy, a Meritorious Service Award is presented for excellence in a particular assignment or task, or for a continuing level of service characterized as outstanding and worthy of commendation. Officer Hanley's continued search for the truth in this investigation, the empathy that he showed towards the victim and her family, along with how he handled himself in the court proceedings and the jury trial, certainly constitute excellence. I am pleased to present, and before I do that, I'll recognize his wife Taylor and the little ones who are here, so thank you for being able to make it. I'm pleased to present Officer Brandon Hanley with the Meritorious Service Award for his work in this investigation. Speech?
I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to receive this award. I just saw it as doing my job and following the truth wherever it led. So I'm honored to be here, but I'm more honored to have spoken with that victim and the courage she showed. I can't commend her enough, and I just try to do my role in this, but I owe everything to her for her bravery of speaking out. Thank you.
Officer Hanley, before you step away, I'd just like to give each of the council members an opportunity to address you. Thank you very much for your service, for your excellent work on this case. I think a lot of people in the community have been familiar with the case, and it's good to know that we have someone like you in our police department that dedicates his time to, as you said, finding the truth. So thank you again for your service on this case. Mr. Fields?
Well, thank you for your service, and keep up the good work. You are definitely appreciated in the community, so thank you.
Mrs. Bishop?
Usually you have an entire team of investigators take over a case like this. So to do the investigative work and all of the work that Chief Shorter talked about on top of his day job with the family is huge. Thank you so much.
I think it's incredibly commendable that you were so humble to say it was the 16-year-old that did the hard work, but you did a lot of the footwork. And I know that she will forever be grateful for your work, as we all are. Thank you.
And Mr.
Thank
Waters.
you so much.
One more, Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Officer Hanley. I know what it's like to work understaffed and to put in those extra hours and make things happen. So thanks for all the work and dedication that you give the citizens of Lake Mills. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think the kids are ready to go home and celebrate with Dad. Thank you, Officer Hanley. And thank you to Council for indulging moving that up on the agenda. So now we'll go back to our regular agenda order, and the next item is item 6, questions and public comment. So the public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comments may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meetings law discourages action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes, state your name and address when starting your comments, and fill out the sign-in sheet provided up at the podium. And if there's anyone attending online who wishes to speak, please type your name and address in the chat feature, and I'll look to see if there's someone who wants to speak there. So I know we have a number of folks who have already signed in, so in the interest of time, I will be trying to keep track of the 3 minutes. So whoever is signed up first can please step up. And if you haven't signed in yet, then when it's your turn, please do sign in before you speak.
Whoa, lost something there. Good evening. I'm Jeanette Heitman, and I live at 510 College Street. I spoke to all of you in August and was also here during your last discussion regarding an ad hoc committee to study the practices currently in place for mature trees in our city. I felt the need to address some of the concerns that were brought forward during your last meeting. This ad hoc committee request grew out of deep concerns on the part of many residents regarding the significant increase in tree removals citywide over the past 3 to 4 years. It is seated in the belief and supported by data that mature trees add value to the health and well-being of all communities, to its residents and to the environment at large. It is further understood that the replacement of large canopy trees with 1-inch understory saplings does not provide equivalent health, environmental, or aesthetics benefits. We understand that some trees will require removal for a variety of reasons, including age, disease, or storm damage. Hence the reason to work hard to protect as many healthy trees as possible. We appreciate the council's questions related to possible cost with new ideas, as well as your commitment to prudent financial management. City residents share those same objectives. Finally, we all come to our jobs with a variety of biases. These develop from our upbringing, where we were educated, our past work experiences, and our own personal belief systems. I believe that opportunities for future collaboration and learning, as would occur with this committee, stretches all of us beyond those biases. Although at times uncomfortable, Exploration of new ideas grows new skills and makes us all stronger professionals. We live in an amazing community that has an outstanding mix of residents from many walks of life. We believe it would be enormously beneficial to allow a platform for collaboration between both city staff and our residents around this very valuable resource, our mature trees. Thank you.
Any questions from the council? Okay. Next person.
Temporarily for 408 Fremont. If there's going to be more discussion around the comprehensive bike plan, which includes the Fremont Street bike routes, then several Fremont Street residents would like specific language to spell out that the Fremont Street bike route would just be a sign route like Ferry Drive rather than dedicated bike lanes, which is going to require expanding the street, which seems to be an option currently. We would like this option to be removed explicitly with a simple sentence saying a sign route only. 3 of us were at the January Planning Commission meeting and presented our case against expanding the street or widening it. Fremont Street is 22 feet wide, and if you follow the USDOT guidelines on minimum width for bike lanes and parking and traffic lanes, you're coming up short at least by 3 feet without dedicated parking lanes. And if you do that, it's going to require moving it 10 feet closer towards the sidewalk. And there was a city decision where there was a request to remove 1 lane of parking, but city staff spoke against it and said 2 lanes of parking is needed for traffic calming. So you've got bike, traffic, and parking lanes, which is not enough for 22 feet. So this project pretty much stems from a generic question with a vague response that biking in Lake Mills is difficult. Yet the survey results do not specify the exact difficulty. There's no survey results saying biking is difficult because Fremont Street lacks dedicated bike lanes. None of the bike riders on Fremont Street requested this. And as a Lake Mills bike rider, my challenge is actually the hill going up Fremont. So riding up a hilly bike path is just as challenging as a hilly street. And other bikers go out of their way to Fremont Street to struggle going up a hill. My experience with biking is on the South Main bike lanes is I was bumped off the street by a boat trailer turning right on Sandy Beach. And I found a paper written by Chicago trial lawyers on the main issue for bike lanes. And it's pretty much not because they're painted or not painted, it's because cars make improper turns, car doors opening, and failing to yield to bikers turning left at busy intersections is the real problem. And adding dedicated bike lanes to Fremont Street, which requires widening it, cutting down trees possibly, does not address this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Temperley. Any questions for Mr. Temperley? Okay, who's next? Is there anyone online who would like to make a public comment tonight? Okay, if there's someone else in the room, feel free to come up to the podium and.
I wasn't sure where I was on the list, sorry. Good evening. I am Lori Drazen. I live at 231 South Ferry Drive. And I'm just really here to kind of bring this kind of up front again about the low lake levels. So back on 7/13, I handed the lake owners petition, which had about over 350 signatures on it, to the JRLC. We collected signatures from Sandy Beach, Woodland Beach, almost every property on Ferry Drive, Lakeshore Drive, homes along the Mill Pond, the condos on the north end, all along Shorewood Hills, Korth Bay, including Cedar Lane and Elm Point Road. We had a huge support at Topals. And I was fortunate enough to take a tour back into Topals where their piers sit. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to do that, but those poor folks are in the mud. Some of the piers on the far side, they couldn't even get their boats in. So the huge support at the Topels area. And then doing that, I was kind of the boots on the ground with a couple other folks that helped me out. So I got to hear a lot of stories, a lot of frustration, a lot of concerns about the management of the dam, the lake levels, and what has been happening the last 4 years. So I spent a huge amount of time with a lot of folks. And I just wanted to bring that forward tonight, just so it doesn't kind of get forgotten that that there are still a lot of people that are very concerned. I still get calls with updates. I get texts, I get emails, you know, what's going on with the low lake levels. So I am on a Facebook page, the Lake Friends, and I do keep them updated as I find things out. So on my personal experience side, unfortunately, we had to take our boat out August 18th. We had 20 inches of water at the end of our pier. And we measured tonight from the shore to the water, we're 8 to 12 feet down. So I just wanted to, and actually when we took our boat out on August 18th, we actually had to push it off the shore station. That's how low the lake level is. And I do have a friend that is living on Cambridge Lake, and I did call her up today and asked her, you know, how's your lake? How's things going there? They still have their boat out. They have no problems. They said their lake is a little low, but definitely not like what we're seeing here. So that's just what I wanted to bring forward tonight. Any questions?
Thank you, Lori. No, just one thing I wanted to share back with you. You mentioned the petition that you had circulated and
Yes.
gathered signatures, and this council did receive that from the Joint Rock Lake Committee.
Oh, very
so just
good.
to make sure that you're aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions for Ms. Dreesen? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Trier, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Rock Lake Improvement Association. Our address is P.O. Box 255, Lake Mills. At this point, you should have all received Rock Lake Improvement Association's full recommendation distributed by Drake on Friday, which contains the data and specifics to augment my brief comments made tonight during this public comment period. Our recommendation was developed over months of research, analysis, thought, and debate. It is a creative and an innovative approach, looking to thread the needle between recreational interests and ecological needs, while rapidly responding to residents' concerns with a collaborative relationship between the city, the DNR, and other stakeholders, such as the Rock Lake Improvement Association. RLIA recommends requesting a 1-year temporary waiver of the 1995 water level order so that the city can capture earlier spring precipitation in order to reach summer prescribed levels. While this waiver is in place, specific agreed-to actions would be taken to see if this concept would work. We call this approach a proof of concept, or perhaps a pilot, or a demonstration project. If the DNR's ecological concerns are not addressed, then the temporary waiver would be withdrawn and the city would return to the current 1995 water level order. This approach allows the spring precipitation to be gathered in 2024 while the DNR evaluates the effect of the change on Rock Lake's ecology. It is a chance to use experimental conditions to review whether that change should be made permanently. If it's successful, a new water level order would be issued, and the city would work to implement that level within the dam's automated operating parameters. With this approach, the city would not be solely responsible for funding required ecological studies. The DNR would provide resources. The RLIA would provide resources, and so would the Land Water Conservation Department at Jefferson County. During a recent conference call, well, not that recent, August 31st, with the DNR, city staff was surprised to find out that if a change in spring water levels was requested, the DNR would request a change in fall water levels. The city staff saw this request as limiting city flexibility. But let's look more closely at fall water levels. Since establishing the 1995 order, subsequent DNR research has shown that the best date to protect turtle and amphibian overwintering is to reach fall water levels by October 1.
And Susan, if you could begin to wrap up, please.
Yes, I am. The current order states that fall water levels run from 9/15 to October 31st. Since 2018, the city has performed a significant drawdown on 9/14 in anticipation of 9/15. For example, in 2020, the city dropped the lake level 3.5 inches in one day. With the automated dam, the city has reached fall water levels no later than September 22nd. Knowing the city's demonstrated drawdown capability, RLIA recommends the new water level order to begin fall drawdown on 9/25 and conclude by October 1. This will give residents an additional 10 days of recreation or added flexibility in removing piers, lifts, and boats. It will also meet the guidelines outlined by DNR research for protecting turtles and amphibians. Our full recommendation has already been shared with you. We urge you to proceed with this creative approach, trying to quickly respond to the needs of your residents, Rock Lake's aquatic inhabitants, and the DNR. RLIA looks forward to continuing this conversation and supporting the city staff and the council in moving forward successfully. We are ready to help this effort to its full conclusion. And then I was just going to let people know who the next one is. Mary Ann. Any questions for me?
Are there any questions for Mrs. Tripp?
Nope. Okay.
Thank you, and we did all receive the report by email.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mary Ann.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Zawaska, 625 Marguerite Street, and I am the co-president of Club 55, the Lake Mills Senior Center. And I had sent, Jan Gregg and I had sent a long email to each of you, and thank you for your responses. I heard from several of you, and one of you said, what's the ask? What are you looking for as far as the senior center? And what it is we are a thriving, active part of the city, and we have one room that we rent from the RLAC, the Rock Lake Activity Center. And the building is in disrepair, to say the least. It's an old school building. And so a couple of years ago, the city had worked with the people that were running it at that point to develop it and clean it up and that sort of thing. And we were well on our way, and then the whole thing fell through. And I don't know if it had to do with COVID. There's quite a few things. I think you're aware of the history. So we really are asking, the ask is we can pick that ball back up again. But this time it's a little different. We're accredited, we have growing numbers, a thriving community, and we're willing to work with you. We're not asking you to give us something, we're asking you to partner with us so that we can get a good community center with a senior focus, and pickleball too, if that's what it takes. And we're going to just continue to keep coming and try to remind you that the seniors are important. That's it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Any questions from the council?
All good?
Okay, great.
Jim?
I don't have anything written. I'm Jim Slattery. I live on Cedar Lane on Corth Bay, and I'm one of these that you're going to probably hear from multiple times. You've got all these emails, but I'm one of these guys that's experiencing what's happening on that lake. That lake is down at least 12 inches. I can see that on my pier, and if anybody knows Corth Bay, it's only about 3.5 feet deep. So we're down to about 2.5 feet. When you get closer to shore, The end of my pier is about 8 inches of water. Last Wednesday, we pushed my boat off the lift. It took 3 of us to push it off. We barely got it off. A couple of days ago, my neighbor to the south had Dino's Dock come and take his pier, a floating pier, and they couldn't even get to the shoreline. So they split the pier in half and pushed it to the shoreline and basically took the stakes that are used to hold a floating pier in place into the base of the lake. And that's where it's going to sit all winter. I don't know if anybody of you have ever gone around the lake on the booze cruise, but I'm the guy that has the beautiful white Lake Geneva pier that's 70 feet long. And it's worth tens of thousands of dollars. And if I can't get it out, it's going to sit there for the winter, or I have to pay thousands of dollars to have somebody try and take it out. And in the wintertime, when we get towards the spring, that lake heaves. And it's not unknown to have 3 to 4 feet of ice piled up on the western shore of the lake. So from a homeowner and a resident of Lake Mills for the last 27 years, please take this seriously. Back in 2021, when the dam failed, I couldn't even get my pier in the water because the lake level was so low. I ended up selling my boat because why should I spend $500 a month on a boat payment for a year that I can't even use a boat? So this whole lake level water issue is very serious, and it's the livelihood of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slattery. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the list, or who would like to speak?
There should be number 7 now.
If you signed up and you're not sure, go ahead and come on up.
Susan Trier, you already.
We had Jim.
Kirk.
Yes. My name is Kirk Lund, and I live at 409 Fremont Street in the city of Lake Mills. I'm opposed to the construction of dedicated bike paths on Fremont Street if the project results in the widening of Fremont Street and the sidewalks or in the cutting down of any trees. It's unclear to me from section 412 of the comprehensive plan what type of bike paths would be installed on Fremont Street. I have been unable to find the bike path plan with specifics to which the comprehensive plan refers. If the plan for Fremont Street is simply to paint bike lanes on the existing street, I would have no objection as long as it results in eliminating street parking on no more than one side of Fremont Street. I want to avoid having crews show up some morning and start cutting down trees, tearing up the boulevard and sidewalk and widening the street and taking 3 feet of our yards for the new sidewalks. And I certainly don't want to be assessed any special taxes for the construction of bike paths that result in the cutting down of trees or widening the street and the sidewalks. I ask that the City Council add language to the City of Lake Mills comprehensive plan and to the bike path plan stating that any bike path project on Fremont Street would not widen the street or result in the cutting down of any trees. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lind. Any questions? Looks like not. Thank you, Kirk.
Next up is Jim.
Another Jim.
Another Jim.
Good evening. My name is Jim Chulo. I'm on Elm Point Road. I too are very concerned about the lake levels, but just a little history before I go forward with my remarks. My wife and I have owned the property there since 1999, and we are on the southwest side of the lake, and this is the lowest level that we've experienced in 24 years. And it's getting to a point where it's becoming very difficult to manage, as some of our other speakers mentioned, to manage not only the watercraft, but to get equipment in and out of the water. I just assisted my neighbor next door this afternoon with the removal of his boat, and we damaged his prop because the level was so low of trying to exit his particular lift. I mean, that's a cost of anywhere between $400 or $500, which probably could have been eliminated. So my concern is that we take this, as one of our speakers already mentioned, extremely seriously. This is, Rock Lake is a great resource to this community and to the county. And if we don't resolve this issue soon, I think it's going to have a major financial impact on the area. So, any questions?
Just, what was your last name again?
I'm sorry?
What, can you repeat your last name for us?
Ciullo.
Thank you.
Ciullo.
Ciullo. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ciullo.
Anita?
Thank you. Anita Martin. We live at 261 Pinnacle Drive in Lake Mills. This is a save the date announcement. We have an electronics and appliance recycling event coming up on Saturday, October 21st, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. It will be held at the Jefferson County Fair Park Building on Jackson Avenue with entrance at Gate 5, which is off of Spangler Road on the north side of the fairgrounds. This is not a hazardous chemical event. It is for small appliances, larger appliances, everything from tablets, laptops, printers, cell phones, toasters, hair dryers, curling irons, flat irons, electronic appliances, no gas lawnmowers, please, and no tires or chemicals, as I said. There would be some fees associated with TVs and some appliances such as microwaves, but in most instances, all of the items that would be brought in would be at no charge. So for more information, please call 920-674-7430. Again, the event is Saturday, October 21st in the morning, and additional information is available at www.jeffersoncountywi.gov/clean-sweep. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Any questions? Okay. Is there anyone else signed up to speak? Thanks, Wendy, for helping. That was it?
Sorry, I forgot. That's okay.
Okay. Is there anyone online who would like to speak tonight? Oh, we have one more from the audience. Come on up and be sure to sign in, please.
I will. My name is Barb Gebhardt. I sent you all through Catherine Bishop a letter, but after these eloquent speakers, I just had to add, we have lived here since 1985. We moved here because we fell in love with the lake. We raised our kids here. Our 3 children have caught thousands of fish from our pier. 2 years ago, we had to sell our boat. This year and last year, I haven't even been down to the lake because when I go down to the lake, and this is the truth, I can't go down there because I cry. I can't stand to see what has happened to this lake. It's dying. If we had grandkids who came over, they're big now, so they don't come over and fish, they would catch no fish. My husband hasn't caught a fish for 3 years. We haven't seen a turtle for 3 years. There are no frogs. We have slime, we have algae, and this year, for the first time, we had foam and suds all over. Our neighbors 2 doors down have not put their boat in. They have 2 boats. They have thousands of dollars tell me when my 3 minutes is up. They have thousands of dollars, on their pier, in their boat lifts. They haven't put either of their boats in all summer long. Something is going on. Since 1985 until 2019, the first year of the new dam, we had no problem. No problem at all. Every year we were able to put our boats in and take them out. 2 years ago, like somebody, we had to sell our boat. We couldn't get it in. Next year, we're not even going to put the pier in. I've talked to Drake and Eric and so many people, and there's so many reasons that this could be going on. We're either losing water to the ground. Drake mentioned something, or Eric mentioned something about all the agriculture, because it's a drought, taking out water for the agricultural crops. All the ideas here are wonderful, but somebody needs to examine and look at the whole picture, because something is going on. The lake is that's 35 years we've been here, and we look at it every single day, and it has never been like this. And I'm afraid, one last thing, everyone talks about the drought. We do have a little bit of drought, but we got 9 inches of rain from May, June, July, and August. We got 9 inches of rain. Where did that 9 inches go? Because the lake is below the winter level. And we also have lost 5 inches I just looked at it today, but I didn't plan. We have lost 5 inches since May 1st. So 9 and 5 is 14. What?
It's time to wrap up,
13,
please.
okay. So I guess I'm pleading with you, for everybody that I've talked to for 3 years now, to please do something. I'll put my name later.
Thank you, Mrs. Gephardt. Any questions for her? Okay, is there anyone else that signed up to speak? Anyone online who would like to speak? Okay, I am not seeing anyone else, so I will close the question and public comment period. And now we'll move on the agenda to item number 7, which is the city manager's report.
I have nothing further to report other than the attachments included in your agenda, so if there's no other questions, we can move on.
Does anyone have any questions for Drake on the reports, attached reports? No? Okay. So then we'll move on to item 8, which is council business. And our first item is item 8A, and that is Ordinance 1256, which is the City of Lake Mills 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Second reading, and the agenda notes that we have a tabled motion to refer it back to the Plan Commission. So I would like to propose that if there are no objections, we would proceed to the second reading, and then we can take a look at taking the motion off the table. Are there any objections to doing the second reading? Okay, Misty, could you read the title of that ordinance, please?
Ordinance 1256, an ordinance to adopt the City of Lake Mills Comprehensive Plan 2040, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Thank you. So that completes the second reading. And then now we have a tabled motion to refer this back to the Plan Commission. So we would need a motion to remove it from the table. And if that is approved, then we can discuss it.
I move to take the tabled motion off the table that will return the September 5th, 2023 version of the comprehensive plan to the Planning Commission to be modified, revised, or amended with the attached recommendations from City Council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Waters, a second from Ms. Quidnow to remove from the table. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion. Misty, can we have a roll call vote on removing the motion from the table?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
No.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye. Aye.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, so then we have a motion to refer this back to the Plan Commission, and Mr. Waters, you had provided a list of items that you wanted the council to consider for sending back, and I think we've received that since the last meeting. So do you want to maybe recap that for us?
Sure, those were prepared remarks at the last meeting. That was basically outlining that that we've gone through a process here where we've done a community survey where we got over 700 respondents back. We've gone through a process of about 18 months where the Planning Commission has worked hard to put together this 200-page document, and we're kind of proceeding with this and putting the finishing touches on it. And I just wanted to take a look at what I felt was the important issues that came out of that survey, kind of pinpointing the 5 big issues and seeing how do we have action plans? Are we appropriately responding to the community's wishes, their feedback? I think it's important to do that. And so as I went through it, I recognized that the small town values with historic preservation was one of the top things. Recreational infrastructure for bicycles and pedestrians was another. Rock Lake and Sandy Beach, which we heard a lot of from the community tonight. The high cost of living here in Lake Mills, and then communication from city leadership. So I kind of went and looked at those 5 issues, and we can kind of go through that a little bit here, maybe take it one by one and have discussion and see if it makes sense to move forward with recommendations, or if there's any other recommendations out there to move forward. Does that make sense?
I like that approach. Does everyone have the Mr. Waters' notes in front of them and the 5 items that he had wanted to discuss? Okay, so you want to start with the first one on the small town values and historic preservation?
Yeah, that'd be great. So we did suggest that some small growth initiatives be inputted, and the consultant went through and did a great job and inputted those throughout the document. And they were approved in this last version. When I take a look at the action plans, the implementation plans outline the preservation of historic resources.
Oh, we're losing your voice, Mr. Waters.
I'm sorry. And you got to bear with me. I got a really bad cold today,
Yeah,
so I apologize.
hang in there.
So, I'll try to speak towards the microphone a little bit. But it talks about the enforcement of city extraterritorial subdivision review authority. It also asks for the implementing the recommendations of the North Side Neighborhood Development Plan, which expands Lake Mills north of the interstate. And I kind of felt that might be a little bit aggressive, and I'd like to see that more as a review process instead of an implementation process for the Lake Mills North Side Neighborhood Development Plan.
So on that one, Mr. Waters, you said you'd like to...
That was on page 910.
Page
910 in the
9-10,
implementation
okay.
plan.
Page 9-10, that's the implementation table. So that's the second line on that page in the implementation table. So you're proposing to just change the word implement to review the recommendations?
Correct.
Any discussion or questions or comment on that one? I just would note that the time frame says as opportunities arise, so I mean it's possible that there won't be an opportunity during the planning horizon. Ms. Quidna?
Yeah, not to be picky about this, but wouldn't review be part of the implementing stage? As in, like, if you're going to review the plan, you're going to do that before you implement it, correct?
That's my point, yes.
So are we just taking implementation off so that we're not actually doing the thing, we're just talking about possibly doing the thing?
Is your idea, Mr. Waters, to update, is your thinking that that plan may need to be revisited and updated, and so then that would be the reason to call it out for review rather than actually implementing?
Yes, I think it should go through a review process before it would be implemented.
Okay. Okay, does anyone have any further question or discussion on, so that's kind of item 1 on the list here. So that's on page 9-10. Okay, would you like to move on to the second item then?
Sure. The second item is on the recreational infrastructure. The council did ask for some revisions, which was accepted. The bicycle map was not included. Ms. Bishop in our last meeting pointed out that the bicycle map was not the same bicycle map that was in the bicycle plan of 2005. She was correct. When I look at this issue overall, I look at it as a safety issue, and it's really important. I guess one of the most important things that I look at from a council representative point of view is providing safety to the community, that being police force, fire, EMS, road safety. The safety of our citizens is very important. And I see that some of these bikeways, as Ms. Bishop pointed out in the last meeting, there's safety concerns that need to be addressed. And I think that putting these pathways in, something that's been noted for over 18 years, it's important that we look at how do we secure the grants and move forward with these type of projects to make sure that our citizens are safe. Especially that project to connect Brookstone to the city. I think that's a very important project. So I suggest that we do add the map from the bicycle plan of 2005. That's the location of proposed improvements. There is a map, that's the last map in that proposal. And that helps meet I think that'll help us move towards what the community is looking for. We have 87% supporting pathways here in the city of Lake Mills, according to the survey. So that's 13%. That's not. It makes sense to do this and move forward with bike safety and improving the city of Lake Mills for bicycle safety.
Okay, so item 2, I guess in a nutshell, you're proposing that we would ask the Plan Commission to add a bicycle map that reflects the 2005 bicycle plan. And I think we have some question about whether the map that had been in an earlier draft of the comp plan was accurately that, but so that is your proposal. So are there questions or discussion? Mr. Fields.
Is that 2005 map different than the one that we were talking about last week then?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
So, Mr. Waters, you had a chance to compare those?
Yeah, I asked the city manager for the current version of the bicycle plan, and he forwarded me that document. So there is a map that shows the location of the proposed improvements. and outlines that.
I had a couple thoughts on this. One is I appreciated the list that you gave of all of the other maps that are in the comprehensive plan. I do think there's a bit of a difference between the other ones that you listed and the bicycle plan map, because the bicycle plan map is a plan, it's a proposal, whereas the other maps that you listed, jurisdictional boundaries, soils, those are all sort of existing resources. So I think there is a little bit of a difference in terms of the type of map or the type of information that's on that map. The other thing I've been thinking about with respect to this one is, well, I guess two other things. One is it's not clear to me that we need to have the bicycle map from the 2005 bicycle plan in the comprehensive plan document in order for it to still be a valid map in our valid bicycle plan. And I think because of the constituent concerns and the feedback that we received at our last meeting, the results of the survey from the comprehensive plan, I think it's fair to say that the 2005 bicycle plan should be updated, and I would love to see, public input to contribute to that. So that's another thought I have about this item. And the third one is that I think we're in this interesting dynamic where everything we do as a city council, we're sort of the top dog, top decision maker, except for the comprehensive plan, which the state statutes delegate to the Plan Commission. So I think we sent this issue to the Plan Commission, and they chose not to make a change in response to our previous request. So I guess I'm a little torn about sending it back to them. We've already asked them, and they've answered by, respectfully saying no about adding the map back. So I guess I'm not sure why they would change their perspective if we asked again. So I guess those are a few of the thoughts that I have about this item. Does anyone else have a comment or a question on the item number 2? Okay. Well,
Ms. Kurtler, I was also.
Please.
Were you recognizing me? I'm sorry.
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Waters.
I was also a little confused by the statements that were made in Planning Commission about not including the bicycle map. They seem to feel that the consensus from the community was that there was no interest in bicycle lanes, and I don't believe that that's the case.
Yeah, and I think there's there were a couple of items, having been at that last Plan Commission meeting, there was the map, and then there's also some language in the text that they were talking about, but specifically with the map, they declined to add it back in. So I think that's where that was left from the Plan Commission coming back to us. Mrs. Bishop.
I'd like to respond to a couple of points, but first off by saying that I stand wholly by my statements in the last meeting in regard to this issue. First off, bikes are supported in the comp plan without specifically listing a map or the specific streets, because there's currently no plan for those streets, whether it's routes, paths, sharrows, etc. Cost, we haven't considered. I think it's ill-fated to put specific streets in a comprehensive plan without a specific recommendations from a lower board on a street-by-street basis that we do not have. My concern, and I'll just state it plainly, is that in months, a year, a couple of years, when people forget this conversation and the process that we've gone through, is that somebody looks in the comp plan and says, oh, West Madison Street, there has to be a bike route there, or a bike boulevard or whatever, because we haven't listed it specifically. And they're gonna use that to shoehorn in plans for their own specific purposes, and I disagree with that, okay? So that's the first point. Second, the allegation that we need to include street names specifically in the comprehensive plan to get grant money is demonstrably false. And I discussed that at the last meeting. When you look at TAP grant applications and other grant applications for connectivity and bike routes, you simply need a resolution from the legislative body stating what the project is, that you're going to support the project and put the funds into it. That is separate from a comprehensive plan, okay? Finally, safety. There are contradictory statements in the 2005 bike plan about safety and where the route should go. In one page, it says West Madison Street should be a bike route. In another page, it says, but children should not traverse these streets and they need to go on less trafficked streets. Those contradictory statements need to be addressed, and I suggested at the last meeting that they be addressed at the Public Works Board first so that they can make recommendations for future action by the council. I do not believe that's appropriate for a comprehensive plan update. Nothing that we are talking about doing here, which includes future bike routes and plans, is prevented from being done by not including it in the comprehensive plan. And Ms. Curley, I'd like to remind you at the last meeting, you also said that you're okay not including the bicycle map in this plan. So on that basis, I'd like to move to strike number 2 to send this back to the Plan Commission from this current motion.
Just the bicycle map portion of number 2?
At this point, I move to strike the whole
Excuse me,
number
Ms.
2.
Bishop. All point 2?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Bishop to, I guess we would say amend the motion to refer this back to the Plan Commission to strike item number 2 from the list. Is there a second? Okay, I'm not hearing a second on that. And I guess I would say just for process-wise, we can go through this entire list of 5 things and can continue to amend at any point in time. So I don't think we're precluded from looking back at item number 2, even if we move forward to discuss the other ones. So, Mr. Waters, I don't know if we got to this detail, but your item number 2 had 2 parts to it. One was, maybe it's 3.
When we go past the map, there's on page 4-6. In the red line notes, it indicates comments BC 19. Plan Commission recommends clarifying that the transportation plan does not recommend consultation with subordinate boards by revising this sentence. I guess I'm having a hard time understanding what that means. I'm not sure if the consultant's in-house or if city staff has comment on that.
Yeah, we do have city staff available as needed on that. So on page 4-6, that is related to the sidewalk plan, that particular language, right?
Yes, yes it was.
Okay. And then the third item that you have under this, number 2, would be removing an example, removing a sentence that had previously been listed as an example, where there's a reference to bike facilities on particular street, on Oak Street and Lake Street.
Yeah, the last time around we asked to remove the example, and they removed the word example instead of the sentence.
So do you want to ask, so we have Dustin here, our planner. Did you want to ask him a question then, or ask staff a question about the sidewalk item?
Sure, I'm pulling that up for that 4-6
Page 4-6
right now.
I think you said, yep.
So that comment, Mr. Wolf, can you explain what that comment means?
And we'll just have him come up to the microphone. He's in the audience. Thanks, Dustin.
Sorry, just getting oriented. So the Plan Commission conversation, and there has been plenty on this issue, was relying on those specific plans, the transportation plan and the bike and ped plan, to be revisited during this project, during future, as a part of implementation of the comprehensive plan, because it does get into that boots on the ground level. And we were having discussions with them that those plans do not specifically say that the subordinate boards, so the Public Works Board or the Parks Board, are not specifically mentioned in those other plans to be consulted as a part of the plan development process. And so the language that has been added, which is highlighted and underlined in there, is that, and I'm looking at Ms. Curler out of this, that the Plan Commission said, yes, sidewalks should be, and bike and ped facilities should be evaluated with future infrastructure projects, but they should be evaluated by those subordinate boards for context. Are they appropriate for the type of street or character of neighborhood within which they are located? That we aren't making a blanket statement that they will be mandated to be included on all infrastructure projects. So it really was just a follow-up saying, the other documents really don't get in that level. This is saying, this comprehensive plan is recommending that when those documents are updated and as a part of procedure, and I'm looking at Mr. Daly on this, as a part of procedure, that Public Works Board or Parks Board or whatever subordinate board to the council would evaluate those infrastructure on a variety of issues, many of which you heard tonight from the public comment, that is this appropriate for this roadway? Is this necessary? What potential impacts could it have to putting it in? So again, we're trying to remove mandating language. We're trying to point out that those specific documents, transportation plan and bike and ped plan, don't call for that level of, I'll say, scrutiny, and saying that it's a point of awareness that needs to be brought up, and that for the public's sake, we recognize those plans don't say those things, but those are important things that should be evaluated when looking at infrastructure improvements. I know it's a little long-winded, but I'm hoping that clarifies what that edit is.
Yeah, very much appreciated, and I totally agree with everything you said.
So I think, Mr. Waters, the point that you're raising there is that sentence, it says consistency with the character of the neighborhood and in consultation with the subordinate board's recommendations are important considerations in the siting and installation of retrofitting sidewalks. I think what you were attempting to point out is that those are not specifications in the current sidewalk plan, but that could be considered or should be considered in a future sidewalk plan.
Should be considered, yeah, for the future, but it's not currently. So I'm not sure how we can maybe separate that or point out that maybe it should be considered for future plans, or the future sidewalk plan, transportation plan.
So somehow adding a reference to in future sidewalk planning to this sentence, it sounds like is what you're perhaps looking for there.
Works for me.
And then on page 4-10, so this is the third item under number 2 in the transportation plan, page 4-10, there was an example that the council had wanted to be removed, and just the phrase "for example" was what was removed. So you're proposing to have the whole sentence removed.
Correct.
Okay, any further discussion at this point on item number 2 on Mr. Waters' list? Okay, item number 3. Would you like to summarize
Item number
that?
3 is a hot topic tonight, I guess. It's about Rock Lake and Sandy Beach. The implementation plan does state that we'd work with the Wisconsin DNR on issues affecting the state fish hatchery, dam management, and implementation of Astilon State Park Master Plan. Of course, City Council asked Joint Rock Lake to review the Rock Lake water levels and make recommendations, which we're going to hear about tonight. I guess I would like to see further information in the implementation plan that is directly related to the preservation of Rock Lake and connected bodies of water and aquifers. When you look at Rock Lake, it's a jewel of our community. It's what makes our city special, and we need to take steps to preserve that. So I'd like to see something added to the comprehensive plan to help with that.
And so this would be perhaps added in Chapter 9 in the implementation plan somewhere?
Yeah, 911 is where that current implementation statement is at. So I'd like to see a further implementation plan.
Just trying to scroll through and find it myself here. Yes, it's
Takes a
on
while to
page
get there,
911,
doesn't it?
it's the last line. Work with DNR on issues. So what we would like to ask you're proposing to ask the Plan Commission to make further statement about the preservation of Rock Lake
Correct.
within that item. And are you proposing anything in another part of the comp plan? I know there's extensive discussion of natural resources in an earlier chapter.
I don't have a specific recommendation. I didn't want to skirt that. I didn't want to get too much into that suggestion, but I thought it would be important for the Plan Commission to review that and discuss with the consultant on proper measures to take in that regard.
Okay, any discussion or questions or comments on item number 3? And proposed revision on page 911. Okay, seeing none, let's move on to your item number 4.
Item number 4 is page 9-9. And that's related to the cost of living in Lake Mills. There's a lot of things that are listed in the implementation plan, including the evaluating alternatives for the future wastewater treatment facility, which I know is coming up on our agenda again here soon. Considering the creation of stormwater management utility, considering the expansion of electrical services, and continuing to explore opportunities for more efficient provisions of municipal service facilities and utilities through cooperative agreements with other municipalities. So my concern is the stormwater management utility. That's something that's been reviewed by council in the past and rejected, but I think that was about 12, 15 years ago, maybe. The laws have changed since then, and it's much harder to implement something like this. The document does talk a lot about the advantages of the stormwater management system, but it doesn't fairly represent all the work and referendums that we'd have to go through, the direct and hidden costs related to the plan. So my concern is including a new tax structure in this document, and I guess I'm either we need to fairly represent this in the document, or I think we should strike it from the document.
Okay, so, and at this point, you're proposing to remove it from the table on page 911 and also remove text that is in chapter 5? Am I understanding that correctly?
Excuse me, yes, that would be correct.
Okay. Any comments or questions on that one, Mr. Fields?
I think this is consistent because I believe in the first round we removed the hotel tax also. That was suggested in this. So I think that removing that would be consistent with what we did last time also in our recommendation.
And that's a good reminder. I think what we asked for with the room tax was to soften it to say consider rather than to do. And just reflecting on the last Plan Commission meeting, they felt like using the words, when the word consider is in there, they're not making that statement to do. And so at least in the table on page 9-9, it does say consider, but it does have a short time frame on it. So I'm not sure how those work together, but it certainly doesn't mandate it, but says to consider it. I guess one thought I would also add is I think, a stormwater management utility, while may have some costs associated with it, the purpose is to improve water quality, including Rock Lake and Rock Creek. So I think, if we care about the quality of our water resources, it's a worthy thing to look into, whether, the Public Works Board ultimately recommends to try it again, or the council ultimately decides to move forward. It still seems like something worthy to consider. That would be my take on it. Mrs. Bishop.
Ms. Curler, and maybe this is for Mr. Wolf too, since you guys were at the last Plan Commission meeting, what was the Plan Commission resolution on this point for consider the stormwater management utility? I thought they had considered it, and it seems like they left it in. Is that not correct?
I believe it centered on that they thought that the consider language was soft enough not to obligate or mandate or indicate that the city will be doing this. If I recall correctly, that was the Plan Commission members' comments on that.
Okay, that's what I thought I remembered, but I didn't take sufficient notes on that point, so thank you, Mr. Daly. So my concern here with this point that Mr. Waters has brought about is this will be the second time we're sending this issue now back to the Plan Commission. So how many times are we just going to keep sending the same issues back to them when they've already spoken and met their statutory mission at that point?
Maybe we can just clarify that point. I'm not sure that this particular issue about stormwater management utilities was on our last list.
I may have been confusing it with another item.
I thought it was, so I may be
I know the
mistaken.
electrical service item didn't have a timeline, and we suggested a change there. I'm looking at the red line version, but I don't know that the stormwater management utility was on our prior list of referral back to the Plan Commission, so this would be a new issue that we haven't asked them to consider yet.
Okay, if it's a new issue, fine. If it's the same issue, which for some reason I thought it was, and I'm mistaken, okay, point taken, thank you.
And maybe Dustin can double check that.
Dustin indicated to me it was not on the previous list.
That was not on the previous list.
I
Okay, so
apologize.
item number 4 would be a new issue if we sent that back to the Plan Commission, which we can do.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on item number 4, which is related to the stormwater management utility?
To
Can Mr.
expand
Wolf
on
make a-
that, Ms. Curler,
Yeah, Mr. Waters.
the wastewater management utility does achieve some positive things for the environment, but it completely will, my understanding is it completely restructures the way we will be taxing our citizens.
And I don't know a lot about it, but I think that is my general understanding as well.
Ms. Curler, I thought Mr. Wolf may have had another statement, so I wanted to give him a chance.
Yeah, please, Mr. Wolf. You might want to just sit on the other side.
You did it to yourself, Mr. Wolf, thank you.
So while this item on the wastewater or potential wastewater stormwater utility wasn't discussed in a lot of detail when you're talking about the implementation chapter because it says consider, it was discussed with Chapter 5 and the potential major public utility recommendations. There's a statement that says consider some of these things. One of them was the wastewater treatment plant, right? And then there was discussion on the stormwater utility. Again, there are certainly members of the Plan Commission who have been serving for decades and remember this discussion from years ago, but their concern there was, again, consider, soften language. Mr. Kuntz specifically said, consider is in there, and it was we should be looking at a variety of measures that may help further important community-wide goals for natural resources preservation or protection. It also, from the Plan Commission's perspective, was that these are decisions that are specifically intended for Public Works Board and City Council to, I'll say, spearhead because of the potential implications related to taxes and fees and such. So it remained in the document in the sense of we shouldn't strike everything that should be considered, right? Their perspective was if it's in the plan, it will get looked at. It may be dismissed for a variety of fiscal, political, whatever reasons, but on the one hand, we had many people coming out talking about the importance of the natural resources, the lake, the need for doing more than the minimum when it comes to stormwater improvements. I'll pick on the College Avenue reconstruction project. You are making certain improvements related to runoff before it gets into the lake. Those issues are things that need to be evaluated as you're looking at infrastructure and then big picture, what could be done within the community. And again, stormwater utility, yes, is a big initiative, but it shouldn't be ignored from a study perspective. And that may be a cursory, what are the implications of doing it? But that's why it was in there, because the public is coming out and saying, what are you doing to protect this? What are you doing? What things could be done to protect this? This is, in essence, getting those thoughts down on paper for people to say, we've heard you. These are some things that could be evaluated. They may not make it through the full vetting process for a variety of reasons, but they are in the document because the public has said, what can be done, talking to engineers, this is an avenue that could be explored. And I stress, could be explored. So, again, going back to Mr. Daly, the word consider was, they felt, sufficient, where it's not the Plan Commission isn't legislating or mandating here. They are bringing things forward.
Okay, any other questions for Dustin on that point? Okay, why don't we go ahead to your item number 5, Greg, so at least we can go through the list and then we can continue to discuss all 5.
All right, so this is also on page 9-9 on communication. It's the statement about coordinating with Lake Mills Area School District and other civic organizations to bring new civic facilities to Lake Mill or to the city. For example, new public schools, a community center, and other parks and recreation facilities. We try hard to keep city business and school business separate. I know in some states, the schools are under the direction of city council, but that's not the case here in Wisconsin. They're 2 separate boards. And I think that we should remove we should honor that separation, and we shouldn't put in the statement of new public schools.
Any questions or comments on that one? I would just add a thought. We, at the listening session that Michelle and I held a couple Saturdays ago, we actually had a citizen specifically comment that she thought it was important that we continue to coordinate the growth of the community with the school district so that as our community grows, the school district is aware of, additional needs that might be coming that the school district would need to address. And I'm kind of paraphrasing, Michelle, maybe you remember it better than I, but that was, there was one particular individual who attended who specifically said, I think it's really important that you keep in communication and coordination with the school district as Lake Mills grows.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Waters, I just wanted to make sure I understand I don't believe, and this is a comment more than a question, I don't believe that the part where it says, for example, new public schools, I don't believe that the implication is that we, as the city, would be building those new public schools. It, for me, comes across that it would be more of a making sure that the facilities and that the routes and everything like that go into consideration when looking at new public schools, just as much as it would be for a community center, parks and recreation facilities. So while I would normally, that would be something I would support as omitting, to me, this looks a little bit different than I think what it may be taken by you, or at least what you've communicated here. So again, I don't believe that it means that we are going to be responsible for building public schools. It doesn't appear that way to me. So I don't know that we need to strike it.
That's a good point. I would support something along the lines of supporting infrastructure for new public schools.
Okay, we could look at the addition of infrastructure and not infrastructure, roadways, or I can't think of the word right now, but basically the ways in which public schools would need to be accessed through the means of the city. Ms. Bishop, do you have words that I clearly do not right now?
No, I was just going to take away a word and really simplify it, hopefully. What if we just strike the word new and just leave it as public schools?
Oh, that's fair. Can we add infrastructure?
Yeah, I certainly think, and I think you're right, Greg, as I'm looking at these two sentences together again, the first sentence talks about bringing new facilities, and it sounds like we would have a role in bringing those facilities, but it also talks about civic facilities, so I think the community center, the parks and rec, those are more of the initial examples, so I think something like, for example, public schools, community center, parks and rec, and associated infrastructure, something along those lines might kind of capture
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
the discussion.
Mhm.
And that again, Greg, can you remind us what page that's on in the plan?
9-9.
9-9, okay. So suggesting to strike the word new and make some reference to associated infrastructure. Okay, so we have 5 items that we've talked about, and item number 2 has kind of 3 parts to it. I think items 1, 3, 4, and 5, if I'm understanding them correctly, are new and that we didn't send them to the Plan Commission previously. And then item number 2 is something that we did send to the Plan Commission previously. Those 3 items. So is there any further discussion on this list proposed by Mr. Waters? I would like to make a motion to amend the list to strike the portion of item number 2 that asks to insert a map from the 2005 bicycle plan.
Ms. Curler, can you restate that motion? I was typing something else.
Sure, my motion is to amend item number 2 on the list to delete the request to insert a map from the 2005 bicycle plan.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Curler, second by Mrs. Bishop. Any discussion? No discussion?
I'll say one sentence because I think I've covered it in the last 2 meetings. I just feel like at the point that the Plan Commission has fulfilled what they're supposed to do by state statute, by coming up with a comprehensive plan, by sending this back to them once, sending it back to them yet a second time is now just bullying a group of subordinate people when we can take action on our own.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend?
I think bullying is a strong word. We have the ability to review the plan in whole when it comes back to us, and that's the process we're going through.
Any other discussion? Okay, Misty, can we have a roll call vote on the motion to amend the list of recommendations to send back to the Plan Commission to remove inserting the bike map from the list?
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, so we have an amended list of 5 items. Is there any further discussion or amendments on that list? And this is a part of a motion to refer this list back to the Plan Commission.
I move to amend number 3 regarding the addition of the wording issues affecting Rock Lake and state fish hatchery, dam management, and implementation of the Astelin State Park Master Plan. I think Rock Lake should be in there. Is it? Okay.
So can you restate what are you proposing to amend then on number 3?
It says, according to Mr. Waters' list here, it says, quote, work with the Wisconsin DNR on issues affecting the state fish hatcheries, dam management, and implementation of the Astelin State Park Master Plan. I'm motioning to amend that to include the preservation of Rock Lake.
So just adding preservation of Rock Lake to that sentence?
Yes, please.
Okay, motion to amend number 3 to add preservation of Rock Lake to that sentence on the bottom of page 9-11. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any discussion?
Ms. Curler, can I just have a second? I'm trying to pull up that page.
Sure.
Just before you move ahead of me here.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of page 9-11 in the table, implementation table.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion or questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion to amend item number 3 on the list to request that the Plan Commission insert the phrase preservation of Rock Lake in the last item on page 9-11. Misty, can we have a roll call on that, please?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. So we have a twice amended list of recommendations to send back to the Plan Commission. Requests back to the Plan Commission. Is there any other discussion or proposed amendments?
Ms. Curler?
Yes, Ms. Quidnow.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as it's stated in number 5, we did talk about rewording it to not include the word new and also include infrastructure. Does that require a motion?
That sounds like that would be a good idea, just for clarity. Want to go for it?
Yep. I move to include the verbiage underneath, let's see, page 9-9, quote, coordinate with Lake Mills Area School District and other civic organizations to bring new civic facilities to the city, for example, public schools, a community center, infrastructure, and other parks and recreation facilities. I may have to redo that.
Can I make a friendly amendment that you'd put and associated infrastructure at the
Yeah.
end of the sentence?
I think
so then
that's
it
what
kind
you
of ties
said.
it to the other items?
Perhaps it should go at the beginning so that it's, for example, associated infrastructure for new public schools, a community, or I'm sorry, omit new, sorry, Misty. For example, associated infrastructure for public schools, a community center, and other parks and recreation facilities.
So now we're going to get really picky here, but is associated infrastructure only modifying public schools, or is it associated infrastructure for all the items in the rest of the sentence?
It technically is doing it for all of them. As a person that teaches English, trust me, it's going to cover all of them.
I also took it to modify all of the list.
So then a question I guess I would have, is it your intention to narrow the list then so that we're only coordinating on infrastructure as opposed to building a community center and
No.
everything that goes with it?
Simply because it's under for example. So since it says for example, I believe that that's to mean that it's an example. It is not set in stone. It is not necessarily, this is how it shall be, this is how it's going to be. It is it's saying coordinate with the school district and other civic organizations to bring new civic facilities. So that's where my mindset goes, and to incorporate the infrastructure or the associated infrastructure underneath the example helps to bring more light to what that would include.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Quidnow. In the sentence on page 9-9 that starts, for example, delete the word new, and at the end of, and in front of that, say associated infrastructure for. I have that right?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Waters. Any more discussion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote on the motion to amend item number 5 as described.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we have a 3 times amended motion with a list of recommendations to refer back to the Plan Commission. Any other discussion?
Ms. Curler?
Yes.
I would
Ms.
just
Quidnow.
like to reiterate, I think it's important that we have this process, not because it's too much nitpicking, but I think it's good to have filters that we go through. And I can understand the frustration that Ms. Curler and the Public Works Board would have with seeing this come back yet again. However, I think after this is all said and done, I feel like this is going to be the best comprehensive plan that we could put together between the two, even though statutorily it's not necessarily our job to work together, but I think it's going to be a good plan that's going to get us in the right direction for the next 20 years.
Thank you, Ms. Quidnow. Any other comments or questions? Okay, can we have a roll call vote on the motion to send a list of recommendations back to the Plan Commission for, to review and hopefully adopt into the comprehensive plan?
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. As I'm sure we'll hear a little later in the evening, it is very difficult to revise a lengthy document and follow the open meeting laws at the same time. So thank you, everybody, for your patience as we have to do this all in open session. Okay, so we're ready to move on to item B, which is Ordinance 1258, which is amending Brookstone Drive parking, and this is the first reading tonight. So Misty, could you read that title for us, please?
Ordinance 1258, amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance Section 615-15, no parking zones, City of Lake Mills, Wisconsin.
Okay, and I know Ms. Quidnow is the sponsor of this, and I know that Chief Schroeder has worked on this. Does anyone have any questions at this time that we want to ask of Ms. Quidnow or Chief Schroeder? You stayed all this time. Maybe you should just come on up, Chief Schroeder.
Bishop had something.
Mrs. Bishop. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Well, I think we're all aware of the wrapping up of the construction of the Summer Ridge Apartments, and I know there was some temporary no parking, and so that has probably precipitated taking a fresh look at the parking along these streets at the entrance to Brookstone. So tell us all about it.
So this was kind of prompted during the construction phase of Summer Ridge with some of the complaints that we had about sightlines and visibility and parking and traffic issues along Brookstone Drive, south of Highway B, and really down to past Crestview Drive. So I implemented, under my authority, some temporary no parking during the construction phase, which tried to limit where the construction vehicles were parking to allow visibility for traffic that was traversing Brookstone Drive. And then Dwayne and I went out a couple of months ago and took a look at the site to see what do we want to do potentially permanently for no parking zones, because there's going to be increased traffic. Then you now have an apartment complex that is emptying out onto Brookstone Drive just across from Crestview Drive. And what can we do to increase safety for traffic on Brookstone Drive, as well as the traffic that is trying to turn onto Brookstone from the apartment complex as well as from Crestview. So Dwayne can kind of explain the methods we use, but we came up with a plan of some no parking zones in that general area to increase safety.
Thanks, Chief. So as was mentioned, we looked at the city code 66038, which is a roadway visibility requirement. We also used the DOT's FDM, Facilities Development Manual, with regards to geometric elements regarding site triangles with the stop sign at Crestview. The other issue that, as we look at this, most of the area is no parking. There is one section on the east side that does have enough space for 3 stalls. The discussion that we had was that the house at 200 Crestview Lane, because of the location of a fire hydrant, the proximity of the driveway to the intersection, and their mailbox, potentially on Crestview Lane, there is not a parking stall in front of that home. So what Chief and I looked at was providing potentially 3 parking stalls on the east side, which would be the northbound lane from Crestview. Any questions for the two of us?
Okay, so I'm looking at the map. You're talking about that house on 200 Crestview not having parking in front of it. Got that. But then what's written on the map is no parking all northbound on that lane. So where are the 3 stalls permitted? I'm not clear.
Sure. As you head northeast from Crestview, on the northeastbound lane, there's 80 feet to a line. That would be no parking. That provides that sight distance from the stop sign.
The 80 feet.
The 80 feet.
And
Then there is a 78-foot piece that would allow some parking, which would be adjacent to that 200 Crestview Lane lot. Those 3 stalls wouldn't necessarily be painted, they would be signed, but 3 stalls at 20, I believe, is 26 feet, is 78 feet. And then after that 78 feet, then it would go back to no parking to the intersection of County Trunk Highway B as in boy and V as in Victor.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you.
I've got 2 questions. One is where this map is portrayed on where the Summer Ridge property is undeveloped. So where is this 78 feet of 3-stall parking area with respect to the driveway that goes in and out of the Summer Ridge apartments?
The driveway for Summer Ridge is almost directly across from Crestview Lane.
Okay. So it would be right adjacent to, so this would be to the north of that then?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess my other question is would it be typical in our lot layouts or other kinds of street planning that we would try to design street parking to ensure that homes have access to street parking? I mean, is that typical? Or, I mean, I can certainly understand the constraint for this particular property, but 3 parking spots seems like perhaps more than one house would need as supplemental parking. So how did you come up with that, I guess?
I guess I would clarify that they're not necessarily specific for that home. We had the realization that they wouldn't have a parking option on Crestview Drive. So our goal was to maximize what on-street parking could be available in that area while still making it safe.
Okay.
We essentially eliminated the entire west side of Brookstone Drive just because of the curvature of the road and the way it would look for traffic coming southbound or westbound, whichever way you look at it, off of County Highway B on Brookstone. If you have traffic parked on the west side of the road, it pushes southbound traffic out further into the road and really reduces visibility sightlines, especially if you had larger vehicles parked there. So northbound traffic wouldn't see southbound and vice versa. So we kind of eliminated parking on the west side for that reason, all the way down to well south of where the entrance to the apartment complex is. And then when we looked at the east side, we said, what parking can we have there? Because of the island, we had to come south further from Highway B, the distance that we did, to allow for semis or other traffic to be able to merge if there are cars parked there and get around that island. And then, like he said, the visibility from the corner and the stop sign at Crestview Drive pushed no parking north. So what we were left with was a 78 feet, which equates to about 3 spots.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I may add, elimination of those 3 stalls is potentially an option as well, because it would provide even more sight lines. It just would require parking for that lot along Crestview Lane rather than on Brookstone Drive.
Got it.
So that is an option that you could consider, sorry.
Okay, and so the ordinance as drafted reflects the map that we're seeing here. Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions about this ordinance? Okay, so tonight was the first reading, so we'll have a second reading of Ordinance 1258 at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, catch up on my agenda here. Okay, the next item is a discussion decision on confirmation of the City Council President's appointment of Bernadette Williams to the Parks Board for a term ending 2026. So I would like to appoint Bernadette Williams to the Parks Board, subject to the council's confirmation tonight, and I'm really pleased to tell you that there was a lot of interest in this vacancy. I had several residents who talked and corresponded with me, several others that were recommended for the position, and 3 people applied, all with different skills and talents that they were willing to offer. So I'm just very grateful that we have so many city residents with a lot of skills and experience and with passion for the Parks Board in particular. So the applicant I'm appointing is Bernadette Williams, who also goes by Bernie. She's sitting in the back row by the green light. Bernie is a retired science educator and a forestry biologist. She's worked for over 20 years in Wisconsin, first at the Milwaukee Public Museum and then at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Bernie has given during her career numerous presentations and field trips to introduce people to science and the outdoors. She has training and work experience in a variety of natural resource issues, including invasive species, forest management, tree health, and working with stakeholders to develop policy. In talking with Bernie, I believe that her passion for nature, along with her training and work experience, will be an asset to the Parks Board and the upcoming issues that they're going to be working on in the next couple of years. So I would ask for a motion to confirm the appointment of Bernadette Williams to the Parks Board.
I move to confirm the appointment of Bernadette Williams to the Parks Board.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Mr. Fields. Is there any discussion? All right, can we have a roll call on the confirmation of the appointment of Bernadette Williams to the Parks Board, please?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. And just in time for tomorrow night's Parks Board meeting, as long as you go to City Hall and sign the oath tomorrow. So, thank you, Bernie. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. The next item on our agenda is letter E, which is a presentation by the Joint Rock Lake Committee and their recommendation regarding lake levels. So I'll ask Wendy Catalani-Davies, who's the chair, to come up and introduce this presentation for us and introduce your members as appropriate.
I'm Wendy Catalani-Davies. I was appointed by the town, and I was elected as the chairperson for this session. We have Daniel Smith, appointed by the town. We have Pat Stevens, appointed by the city, and Kevin Lehner, appointed by the city. And we have Trish Fullerton, who couldn't be here tonight, also appointed by the town. And I thank them for being here. And we're going to kind of tag team the presentation. First of all, it was a very hard task and project, as you've heard a lot of people commenting. But I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to give you the input that we have received and analyzed to the extent that we could to make your important decision. I want to thank the city staff, special mention to Eric Schreiner, who we've called and said, can you? And he did. So that was very nice. And the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources team, some of them I think are on the Zoom meeting. The County Land and Water Conservation Department, many of them were helping us along the way. The RLIA, who did some talking as the comments in your earlier part of the meeting, were very helpful with many things. And of course, the many members of the public that provided input to the Joint Rock Lake Committee. We provided you, as was mentioned earlier, with a petition signed by more than 300 individuals that expressed concern about lake levels and voicing their opinion to you. The next slide. As we've heard, the Rock Lake water level is very important, very serious, and very emotional issue, as we can hear. We need to protect the fish and the critters and the ecosystem. I want to continue to recreate the way I'm used to on the lake. I want to ski and whatever, and I want to do this. And I want to protect my shoreline. And what data is statistically relevant? It's hard, there's all kinds of statistics out there. We need navigability and access. We need to get our boats in the water and out of the water, and our piers in the water and out of the water, and we need to fish. And we need to keep within the DNR guidelines. So you tasked us with a resolution that said for us to gather information regarding the process. We're going to present some information about that tonight. Collect and analyze relevant data. We're not going to go through every piece of data, but we did provide you with the information that you did request on lake daily water levels, ice out dates, and regional precipitation trends, as well as other pieces of statistics. And then we did develop recommendation with options for you to consider regarding the water level management and dam operation. And we prepared this report. So I'm going to have Pat Stevens do this next part of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone.
Again, my name is Pat Stevens, and I'm one of your appointees on the committee, and delighted to be here today. My role here today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the process that goes on if the City Council decides to pursue a change with DNR in regard to the Rock Lake order controlling the dam. As you're probably well aware, DNR is really ultimately the authority that dictates what's acceptable in that regard. But before I do that, I thought I'd just back up for a second and start with a little bit of background, and that really starts with the statute. And the statute is really what gives DNR specific authority to regulate dam levels on all navigable bodies of water in the state. And in particular, there's language in there as well that gives some indication about the sort of things that DNR considers when they're looking at dam orders and setting levels for different water bodies. And I'm just this is a paraphrase, but just to read it to you briefly. The department, in the interest of public rights in navigable waters to promote safety and to protect life, health, property values, and economic values, may regulate and control the level and flow of water in all navigable waters. So again, a very broad charge. And out of that phrase that I just mentioned, there's a number of different factors that DNR considers when they look at dam orders, and I'm just going to mention a few of those that are kind of in play in this particular instance. One of those would be that DNR looks to make sure that natural resources such as fish and game habitat are protected when they're looking at setting levels for lakes. They also consider, for example, preserving the acceptable conditions for navigation and incidents to navigation. So again, you heard a lot about that from the members of the public, concerns about navigability and the ability to get your boat in and out of the water. Again, something that's specifically charged with DNR to consider when they set dam levels. In addition to that, there's other things that are also incorporated into that, and those include things like minimizing property damage resulting from erosion or ice action. You heard about that also today, and concerns to make sure that property wasn't damaged in that way. To prevent failure of structure for infrastructure if you have a dam that has issues, for example. So I'm not going to go through all those, but to just give you a sense, when DNR is looking at these things, there's a lot of different factors that they consider, and I'll talk about that more in a minute when we talk about the meeting that we recently had with DNR. But before I do that, I did want to talk a little bit about the process. This is a little bit strange because the process is actually not contained in an administrative rule, which would be typical when you're dealing with a regulatory agency at DNR. This is really the approach that's specified in the guidance document, which really doesn't have the force and effect of law. But it's kind of simple in the way it reads, but probably not in terms of application, as we'll get into in a minute. But this really starts out with an application that's submitted by any person, can petition the DNR to establish water levels. And that generally is done in just a letter form. There's no specific document that you have to submit. But what is requested in that letter is a specific ask for what you're asking for, right? There's got to be something that's being proposed, so DNR has something to evaluate and to decide whether that makes sense or not from their regulatory perspective. A couple of words on public notice. Interestingly, for this process, there's not a requirement for public notice or a public hearing. DNR does have an option to have an informational hearing if it would like to. From a practical standpoint, it's probably good to have public input. As we all know, we've got a lot of public input throughout this process. But again, to make sure that not only those that have concerns, but those that might have other issues associated with this, to make sure that all that information is taken into consideration if you decide how to move forward. And then another item I'll talk about more on the next slide has to do with field investigations. One of the things that DNR stresses in its guidance documents for this type of dam order is they want to have good information. And so they really emphasize the need for that field investigation to have some real specific information in terms of what's going on in regard to the impacts. And then finally, as you're, I think, aware, how this would happen ultimately if DNR did approve a change is there would be an amendment to the current order. to make whatever changes, ultimately you would decide to pursue, assuming, again, those were proposed. And by the way, giving you kind of the short story here, but in your packet, you've got examples of orders and also applications to take a look at if you're so inclined to do that. Next slide, please. I don't have the control, do I? Or do I? Oh. Okay. There we go. All right. So just a summary of a meeting that we had on October 31st. And we had a number of different folks that participated in that. Both myself and Kevin Lehner from the Joint Rock Lake Committee participated. In addition to that, we had Drake participated, and I think some other city folks as well were on the line. We had Jefferson County representatives as well. So we had, again, a fair amount of folks on that. In addition to that, we had 15 DNR staff, roughly. I didn't get the final count in terms of folks that were on that. And one thing that's kind of unique about this process compared to when you typically deal with DNR, you submit your application for a permit, one person reviews it, and you get a decision. Because of the different issues that are involved in a dam, you basically are working with a team of folks. And Aaron Cox at the DNR has been kind of our liaison for that and was kind enough to pull together this meeting again, which is significant to give us some kind of preliminary feedback on some of their thoughts and issues as we had considered, again, changes. And in particular, one of the things they focused on, because it was the thing that has really garnered most of the attention, was the idea of moving up the spring date. That's in that order. So in essence, you could save water earlier to make sure you have enough water to release for summer to try to keep those levels up. And in the course of that discussion, while again, we appreciate the meeting, not a lot of great news from DNR's perspective as initial take. Keep in mind, they don't have any, again, application before them. And this is, I think, preliminary thoughts. But some of the things that came out was moving the date could potentially impact the walleye spawn by having a negative impact on the habitat on the east side of the lake. So again, there's a fishery issues that DNR is raising that is a potential concern regarding lake levels at that time of year. There's also a discussion regarding potential wetland impacts, and they need to get additional information in that regard. So DNR actually wants a study to evaluate what those potential impacts could be. They noted that they could help with that, but if we're going to wait for DNR, they're talking about 2024. So it's not really in terms of the time frame that we were hoping to move forward with in regard to this project. Another option would be for the city just to go forward if they have funding to do that and decide that that's an appropriate approach. That's a possibility as well. And then DNR had also investigated potential impacts on rare fish in the lake. And it seemed at that point there wasn't really a concern that was raised in that regard. But another issue that they were still in the process of looking at had to do with rare and aquatic plants, and that review had not been finished, or we didn't get any information on that. And then the last item on this slide is really kind of the kicker that I want to make sure you consider is that as was noted earlier by one of the previous speakers, DNR believes that the October 31st date is too late, and that should be moved up. That's significant because what that in essence could do would mean that you would have less water season to recreate in the fall because you're moving up when you start lowering that water level and takes away some flexibility in the order. And their concern about that has to do with critters that live in the lake. Frogs and turtles in particular were mentioned, and the need that DNR in essence was saying if you open up this order, that's something that they'll want to look at pursuing. My personal thought of that is that that order's been in place for a lot of years, and so it'd be important to have a good understanding of why that would be a real issue, considering again the period of time that that's been in place. So I think I'm transitioning back over to Kevin, but that's just kind of a brief overview of the process, and maybe before I go, if there's any questions.
I've got a question, and Dave, if you could maybe go back a slide. I have two questions. One is with respect to the DNR process, since it's not codified in any kind of a code, is there any kind of timeline that DNR was able to provide you in terms of like, if the city were to file a petition, approximately how long would it take for them to complete a formal review?
Yeah, I don't recall getting a specific time frame out of them, and some of it depends, it's really kind of site-specific in terms of like the wetland study that I mentioned, for example. If we're gonna wait for DNR to help or not do it at all, or, have the city do it itself. So the timeframes are really, there's no specific time deadlines that I'm aware of.
Okay, because I know that was something I had the opportunity to attend a number of the Joint Rock Lake Committee meetings, and many folks were concerned that, we want to get an answer by next spring, but if there's no clarity or certainty on exactly how long that process might take, we don't really know, how that would work. And I guess my other question is on this last line that you have there, about changing the fall date. Did DNR indicate, it sounds like they indicated that if we were to ask for the water level order to be opened, then they might look at more aspects of the order than just the reason that we would be requesting. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, and that was my understanding of what they were saying. I think others might have thought they were more absolute on that, but what I took them to be saying is that in the event you do go forward with this, that's something that they're definitely going to be looking at.
And then just as a follow-up, you don't have the impression that DNR would be coming in and changing the order without the city requesting an evaluation, do you?
Well, again, that's my interpretation, but I guess I'm not sure I would, commit to that, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Pat on these last couple slides? Mr. Fields?
I have a couple. I have a couple questions. I think the lake level is extremely important. So following what you're saying here, one of the things in the report that caught my eye that I'd like to ask about is the case study that you had listed in here from the major rain event that we had. And that basically the lake, we gained some level, but then lost 1.7 inches in 2.5 days. I guess I'm trying to look at the bigger picture here. Even if we change this and we have a different problem, we're not solving the problem. Did the lake, I guess this opened up a lot of questions for me, did the lake level stabilize after it dropped that 1.7 inches in them 2 days?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best one to answer that for you about the stabilization. I don't have a good answer for you, but I think, in the course of this, we have had discussions and things have come up about, what's happening with some of the water, whether you're getting seepage in the groundwater because of the drought is one of the issues that's come up, and what exactly is influencing all those levels. I think you're probably aware there's been, a study of the dam, and the dam seems to be operating appropriately.
Yep.
So, again, I don't really have a definitive answer for you, and maybe others have thoughts in that regard.
I'm just wondering if there's additional investigation going on too. Is there something that's siphoning the lake down to a lower than normal level that's drawing the water out so that, okay, now we're starting at a low level and then evaporation that just keeps taking it down? To me, just reading this case study, there's another issue going on here. It's not just the dam, because if this case study, the dam was in manual and operating properly, there's another issue. Maybe it's the DNR pipe to the fish hatchery that's leaching water out. Maybe it's somebody someplace else drawing water out. But for us to lose 2 inches in 2.5, almost 2 inches in 2.5 days,
yeah,
and if it's stabilized, we have another issue other than just rainfall.
Yeah, and you've hit on a lot of the issues that potentially influence those levels, right? Whether it's evaporation, whether it's the fish hatchery, whether it's seepage to groundwater, all those things are potentially contributing to, a decrease in kind of what the mix is or how exactly that fits together. I'm not sure we have a definitive answer for you.
Yep. So I'm not opposed to this, but I don't think this is a solution. I think we have another problem going on here. That's just reading the paperwork, that's my gut feel.
And I know you have some additional slides that are maybe going to show some of that too. So any other questions on that process piece for Pat?
Would opening this up too with the water, would that change anything on our potential outflows with the wastewater treatment plant? I know there's options with the wastewater treatment plant out there. If it did move off the creek, it could change the water flow, but by opening this up, could the DNR change that requirement on us also?
No, I don't believe it would affect that. Different body of water, different regulatory review.
Okay.
I don't believe opening up the lake level discussion would result in a review of any of our wastewater regulations.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. My name is Kevin Lehner. I live at 523 College Street. I think there's still a street there. It's under construction right now. And I participated. I want to thank City Council for asking us to help you with this process. My role here is kind of talk a little bit about the options. I think the slide we see here just gives you a general idea of some of the data that we looked at to try to arrive at our options. So if we could go to the next slide, perhaps. We have, basically there were two high-level recommendations. The first one here is the city should consider requesting the DNR to revise the water level order. Okay? The water level order dates back 30 years almost, and it's very difficult to always be in compliance with it. It has some conditions where the water level needs to change instantly, almost from 9 inches, the way the water level order is written. So, it creates some problems with demonstrating compliance. So that's one of the levels. We had 4 different options associated with this first recommendation. So I guess if we were going to request a revision to the water level order, one of the options in the request might be, hey, let us leave that water level up at the highest level we can and never lower it. Because what's the thinking here? Well, once we let the water out in the fall, we have no guarantee that we're going to get it back next year, right? It's kind of like what happened this year. And there are a lot of complex factors that interact that affect water level in Rock Lake, including the dam, including evaporation, including how much precipitation we get, right? We've had a drought. So, it's not, you can't really blame one thing, like the operation of the dam for where we are, okay? With this one, we keep it high. This really helps out with some of the navigation issues, right? Recreational issues. There are some pretty strong drawbacks associated with ecological impact potentially, with fishery spawning, and also in the fall, some other issues. So that was the first option. Leave it at the high level. The second option is just request seasonal water level targets that are to be achieved gradually, rather than this requirement that we instantly get from this level to this level, right? That consider the needs of parties interested in both recreational, right, boating, and environmental impacts from changing water levels. And then here are just some examples of what we might ask them to do, okay? The third option, if we go to the next slide, is very similar. It just has some different dates for when water levels should be changed, okay? And then option 4 really is make no adjustment to the water level order in place. The city and DNR would track water, lake levels, and lake temperatures to make a more educated approach about changes to the water level order. So this sort of says, hey, well, let's live with what we got and let's study it, okay? These options were sort of consensus amongst the group, and there may be some other options that the city could consider, of course. So those were these options. As Pat mentioned, almost all of these, except the last one, are going to compel some sort of evidence be produced to DNR to support a request to change the water level. And what that involves is uncertain. It's kind of like you say, hey, we want to change the water levels to this. DNR is going to come back and say, hey, prove to us that that's not going to hurt the marsh. It's not going to hurt Marsh Lake. Okay, so, your question, Lisa, about timing, there could be a lot of back and forth depending upon what we ask them for. So it's really hard to predict. So those were the options associated with requesting the DNR to take a look at the water level order. Okay, this last little sentence here is kind of important. The city should operate the dam in a manner that takes advantage of the flexibility in the order to meet desired lake levels. For example, in the fall, the city could slowly lower the lake level rather than releasing water quickly to maximize fall-winter levels, okay? In other words, keep them up so that folks can get their boats off, assuming that we have enough water in the lake to do that. Right now, we're not going to let any water out of the lake because it's so low, right? And then also operate within the range of desired water level versus attempting to achieve the medium level. There's a lot of back and forth over the years about median levels, high levels, those types of things. But this one really leads into the next recommendation that we made. And if we could go to the next slide. This one says the city should establish a documented dam and gate operating procedure to ensure the city maintains effective control of the dam in compliance with the water level order. Over the years, there have been some questions about, well, when do we start releasing water? Who gets to decide when we start releasing water? What are the preventive maintenance that needs to be done periodically on the dam itself? Who's responsible for doing that? What kind of competencies does someone who operates the dam need to possess to make sure that it's being operated in a good way? So what we're suggesting here, or recommending, is that the city think about, creating a documented operating procedure, who does what, when, where, why, and how. Use that to operate it. So that's like that bullet point 1. Create and maintain, okay. And then the third bullet item here, consider performing periodic assessments of the dam operation to confirm it is consistently being operated according to the operations manual and the most current water level order. So in other words, you can have this procedure in place, but if you don't go back and check it periodically using some sort of audit process, we may not be achieving what we're trying to achieve. So trying to have somebody take a look at that. And then the results of the dam operation assessment should be communicated to the city council for review, approval, and follow-up action as necessary in a timely fashion. In other words, create this procedure, city council gets a look at it. Yep, we think this is a good way to operate the dam, this is a good procedure, approve it, and then move forward. So that's that. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Any questions from council members? Mrs. Bishop?
She saw me moving to turn my mic on. I'm willing to let somebody else go first.
Or Mr. Waters? No question?
All good.
Mr. Fields?
Is there any plan to continue doing some research and this case study as far as what may have caused that water to decrease so rapidly, or
again,
try and track some more information?
Great question. Great question. Personally, we've seen some measuring issues associated with the way the water level has been measured over historically. There's what's called a transducer. I think it's a pressure transducer that measures the water pressure. Sometimes that doesn't work just right. And I think that my personal feeling is, before we start claiming that there's this other big problem, let's make sure that our measurements are good, that we did lose 2 inches of water in 2 days. I don't know, I don't know where the instrumentation was taken. I mean, it's possible to lose a fair amount of water from evaporation, too. So, and quite honestly, the kind of study that would be required to try to solve the mystery of where did that 2 inches of water go would probably be a pretty significant investment in hydrogeology, hydrology, need a lot of experts weighing in on it. You could do it, but I mean, I can't do it, Pat can't do it, Dan can't. We don't have the competence to actually be able to do that. You're gonna have to get some experts to kind of sort through that. But I would start, if I were gonna start somewhere, I'd say, okay, how did we actually measure that? Why are we claiming that that 2 inches is gone? How, is that an accurate measurement? We've seen measurement problems in the past. So anyway, that's.
Exactly, and if we could repeat it after rain events to see if the similar type action or level was being adjusted regularly, that would maybe tell us that we have another problem or an issue to chase. But we need a good rainfall in order to do that.
Right,
So
right. It'd be nice if we
and
got
it's people who are gonna go and, like yourselves, I appreciate you going and gathering all this documentation. To just reading this case study got my mind going that
yeah.
I wanted more information as I was reading it.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think, it's additional information that begs more questions, right? So I'd love to see us get 3 inches of rain and then measure, hey, did the water go up 3 inches? Kind of like begin to start looking at some of that. One of the other interesting things that DNR mentioned that might be considered that we didn't put in here was that, if we measure water temperature, if we actually started measuring water temperature, that might help us decide when we need to lower the water and raise the water, okay? Has to do with spawning and the reptiles and salamanders. So that might be something to consider also. So there's a lot of things that we could potentially do. If we do open it back up, the city's probably going to have to invest some effort in gathering data and supporting whatever recommendation they make. So, any other questions?
Mrs. Bishop, did you have some questions?
I had a couple. I'm going to start at the very beginning. Well, first off, thank you guys. This was very detailed. I know it's very complicated. I really appreciate the recitation, you all being here. It's great. Thank you. I'm going to start on page 13 of 24 of your report. And let me get back to it. I'm sorry, I was scrolling, looking at something else. 1 second here. Okay. Page 13 of 24 of your report. So in your header, compliance with the Wisconsin DNR water dam order, it's stated here that the committee was not able to verify the most current version of the water level order. So what we were provided in your first exhibit is, I assume, from 92. And do you have a track record of other communications that may have changed or modified that order? And were those included in any of your recommendations?
If I'm understanding the question, do we have a good track record of the correspondence with DNR that adjusted that water level order, or the interpretation of it?
Right. What are you basing that on? Because you say we don't have basically the most current version of the water level order and communications between the city, WDNR, Jefferson County, and others that have officially modified the order that was first issued in 92.
Yeah. Right. Okay, great. The water level order was issued formally, okay? And again, as I said, it's really difficult to adhere to the letter of the compliance order. On like May 1st, the water level needs to be here. On May 2nd, the water level needs to be here, according to what the water level order said. So there's been correspondence back and forth in sort of quasi-official documentation. To my knowledge, the water level order, the official water level order, was never updated or changed to reflect some of those discussions. I mean, maybe council has a little better handle on that.
So 1 year, can I give some how I think I'm understanding that. One year it would have been like, hey, DNR, this is what's happening. Are we okay being at this level this time? And DNR emails back, says, yeah, that's fine this time.
It's kind
And
of
then is
like
that an
that.
official modification? Who knows? It's kind of what I'm
Right.
getting from the discussion.
And some of the correspondents are kind of like, well, in my opinion, as a DNR person, I think that maybe we could, you could do, if you did this, we'd be okay with it. In reality, what DNR's been doing is exercising what they call enforcement discretion. Because, I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that we've been looking at, you can see very obvious non-compliances with the strict letter of the water level order, right? You can see it. So in order to try to accommodate that, people have been asking, hey, what do we do about this? It's correspondence with the city, the county, and those most of those are reflected in the appendices. If you go into the appendices, you can look at those.
Mrs. Bishop, just to follow up on that point, I think the one document that we have in Appendix A, and from some other reading I've done, I think that was related to changing the reference elevations and the benchmarks rather than actually altering the water level order. And so I think it would behoove us, or maybe staff has in the records, like, getting from DNR what is the official water level order that is currently in effect, and making sure that the city has that, as our starting point.
Right. Well, I think it's the starting point, saying, here's what we've been doing based on all of this. This is the most recent point of contact. From this, we want to do now this.
Got it. Yeah.
That's how I mean, obviously, this is a huge conversation, and it's all in progress. Good. Yeah. Did you have something else?
So just to follow up on your original question about the reason why that was written that way is because we didn't get that official document from DNR. And we could do that. We could do an open records request, and they would be required to produce that, and maybe that's the way to do it and get the whole, record in regard to that. So that was basically a hedge because we'd got a lot of that information off the website, and so we didn't independently verify that. So that was why that was written that specific way.
Okay, that's helpful. I had another question on this page specifically, so if I may.
Yes.
In that same paragraph on page 13 of 24 of the report, it says the water level order requires the city to request DNR approval to draw down Rock Lake below minimum established lake levels during prolonged drought levels. And then later in the report, there's reference to we may be in a drought. I don't see any definition of that term either from the DNR or elsewhere. Do we have a definition that we could use? And then as a starting point, say, hey, we're in a drought. We need to completely modify these before we go into any of the other recommendations.
Yeah, I really can't speak to the communications with the city, so I don't know if you have any more thought about how that's defined, but that's a good point. That creates another level of variability about how that gets applied, and that's part of the challenge with how that kind of grows and just kind of more informal communications going back and forth on some of these issues.
Right, and I don't know if city staff had a comment on that, but what I'm getting at is let's keep the water levels as they are, as they ask, because we're in a drought. This is the most severe, dire thing, and then from there we can work on further recommendations based on what Joint Rock Lake Committee and the council decides to do. It's sort of like an intermediary measure.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add that if you look at your water level order right now, there's stipulations, and the stipulations are they feel a little wishy-washy to me. They're kind of like, you can do this and you should do that, and here's and the recommendation to keep the gate at median level, that was a recommendation. You chose to follow it, and that's okay, but maybe you shouldn't have, I don't know. So it's kind of the communication pattern and following it up and trail is difficult. But we're happy to do any more that you would like us to do, and we were really pretty happy that we were asked to do something this important. And so anything else we can do, we would be happy to try and do within our level of experience.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you offering that, and I thought you guys would say, we're done with this for a while, so leave us alone. I do want to acknowledge the work that Joint Rock Lake Committee did. Certainly there is endless amounts of additional data that could be gathered or analyzed, and I don't think we could have necessarily expected you to do all of that. Certainly not in the timeline. I mean, you produced this 6 weeks earlier than we asked for it, and I think you were very responsive to, the meetings that I attended. You had 50, 60 people at a couple of them, all very concerned about the lake levels and the urgency of it, and you really took that seriously. You scheduled a couple of extra meetings in addition to your regular monthly meetings just to have work sessions and to really work on this, and I'm sure there was countless hours outside of your meetings for each of you to gather this information. So on behalf of the council, I really want to thank you for all the work that you did to put together this report and come here tonight.
You're welcome.
So I've got a suggestion. I don't know if council members have any other thoughts. We don't have a decision item before us tonight, but we heard from the Rock Lake Improvement Association, and they shared a report with us. We've gotten this report that we asked for from Joint Rock Lake Committee. I know that city staff has been doing work, talking with DNR, having the dam inspected. Would it make sense maybe to ask the city staff to just sort through all these reports for us and come back with some kind of a memo or suggested options that we could consider as our next step? And then we could use that as a framework for discussion at a future meeting? What do you guys think? I mean, I think we do want to keep moving, but I know there's probably information that the city staff could share as well about what you've been working on and how you've been trying to, sort through all of this. Drake, what are your thoughts?
We will compile the information, put it together for you, and we will target the first meeting in October as best we can. I'll update you if something changes. That will be the goal, and we'll discuss at that time.
And certainly any options that you may have thought of in addition to, what the other, what the Joint Rock Lake Committee has recommended, or maybe things that you've already started working on that they've recommended that, we can know that are kind of in progress. Thank you again. Appreciate you all staying so long. Okay. The next item, Kevin, since you're here, the next item has your name on it. We have Resolution 23-62, which is a privilege in the street for Kevin and Leann Lehner at 523 College Street. So Misty, would you read do we read the titles of resolutions? Yes. No.
Yes.
It's late. I'm sorry. Okay. Let me just get that agenda item up.
I'll make it easy on you. I move to approve Resolution 23-62, authorizing the granting of a privilege in the street for the prohibited encroachment or encumbrance of the right-of-way at 523 College Street.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mrs. Bishop to approve Resolution 23-62. So staff comment.
There's a memo included from Director Myram. He is available if you have questions of him. He did recommend approval of the privilege with the conditions as outlined in his memo. If you have further questions, he's available to answer them.
Any questions or comments? So I would note, Randy, that you indicated in your memo the city would do the installation as a part of the College Street construction concrete work that's coming up here. Do we need to incorporate that? And then the Lehners would reimburse the city for their portion of that cost. Do we need to incorporate anything into the resolution, or is that just understood? That condition?
I think there's options there. You could incorporate that into the resolution. I think it's requisite based on the local ordinance and the privilege in the street itself. And then I think the other question is really what practice is going to be. Is the property owner, the petitioner in this circumstance, going to contract with our contractor that is doing the concrete work, or is it going to be part of the city's contract doing the work? I don't know that that's necessarily settled. My preference on that point would be that the property owner actually contract with the contractor on their own, and we're just allowing the placement of this privilege, of this infrastructure. I think that's cleaner and that's easier for us, but there is certainly no doubt that this implement, the carriage walk, would be installed on the owner's dime.
Okay, and so it sounds like maybe we don't need to, the council doesn't need to concern itself with how that takes place.
I don't think so.
Okay. Right, any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just,
Oh, Mr. Waters.
Past, I think we've done something similar to this on past projects like maybe Mulberry Street.
That's correct.
So this is common practice then?
We collect privileges for the placement of carriage walks in the right of way if they are sought to be retained, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, can we have a roll call vote on Resolution 23-62, a privilege in the street for Kevin and Leann Lehner at 523 College Street?
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Next item, letter G, Resolution 23-63, which is an amendment extending the development agreement for Riverwood Holdings. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 23-63, amendment extending development agreement number 18-003, Riverwood Holdings.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Staff comment?
This development agreement has been in place for many years, since the beginning of the Brookstone subdivision build-out, phases 6 through 10. It is the desire of the developer to continue that arrangement for the last 2 phases, which is what this extension will hopefully encapsulate. I did receive a question from Mr. Waters as to if this creates any risk for the city, and the extension doesn't create any more risk than the original agreement did. Essentially, what the most important piece of the agreement is that the city installs the infrastructure in preparation for more buildable lots, and then the city recoups that cost from the developer at the time of the sale during closing. Now, if those lots don't sell, I believe it's a 5-year time frame, the developer is responsible for paying that back to the city regardless. So so they waive special assessment, rights to special assessment in return for the fronting of the infrastructure cost, and then if those lots don't get built, the responsibility is ultimately the developers to make the city whole on it. So the extension of the agreement would be required by the developer in order to move forward with future phases. We did have conversations about that. It has worked out for the city. The original goal was to facilitate the continual availability of new single-family home lots. So this is a continuation of that in order to complete the build-out of this subdivision.
Any other questions or comments? And I think our next agenda item is for infrastructure in Phase 8. And if I recall, we really do try to time our work so that it's close to when, in coordination with the developer, so that we have good reason to believe it's not going to take 5 years, and we'll be able to recoup those costs quickly.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? If not, can we have a roll call vote on Resolution 23-63, amending the amendment extending the development agreement number 18-003 with Riverwood Holdings?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item, Resolution 23-64, which is a bid award for Contract 2-2023R for Brookstone Phase 8. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 23-64, bid package award of authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Wandra Construction Incorporated for Contract 2-2023R.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Mr. Fields. Staff input?
Staff does believe the bid is competitive. We've consulted with the developer, and he is also on board with moving forward. If you have specific questions about what the project entails, our consultant engineer Brandon Herbertson is available online, but staff recommends approval.
Any questions or comments for staff? I have one question. I noticed Brandon's letter said that they didn't have any experience with Wanda Construction. So how do you go about determining if a contractor is a responsible bidder when we haven't had experience with them?
Brandon, would you like to touch on how you evaluate whether to recommend whether a bid is responsive?
Sure. Well, I guess slight clarification. Strand doesn't evaluate the qualifications of the bidder to determine whether they're responsive or not. That's a city or as defined in the contract, the owner is responsibility. The contractor did have to submit a qualifications packet as part of their bid, so that typically entails the assets, outstanding contracts, past work, references, things like that. So they are kind of like a known entity, if you will. I mean, they're a contractor that's been around for a while. Certainly have worked on projects in the area. But I guess Strand or myself did not specifically look into whether they were considered qualified or not. That would have to be a city thing. But from kind of their experience in the area, we weren't necessarily worried about it, but it certainly falls to the city to evaluate their responsiveness or responsibleness, if you will.
Drake, any other thoughts from city staff?
No, just based on the completeness of the bid package and the materials that they submitted, we don't have any reason to believe that it's not a responsible bid.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, can we have a roll call on Resolution 23-64, which is the bid award for Contract 2-2023R Brookstone Phase 8?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we have 3 agenda items left, and I'm just noting the time that it's 10 to 10. So I would, if there's no objection, I propose that we keep plowing through. Okay. Next item is letter I, Resolution 23-61A, establishing an ad hoc committee on city tree policy. So
Ms. Curler?
Yes.
I think to follow parliamentary procedure here, we probably need to bring up the tabled motion, and then I would remove that from the table and then revise to the new resolution that's included in the packet. Does that make sense?
It doesn't. I think you were reading my notes, because that's exactly what I was thinking of as well. So yes, we have 23-61, which is currently 61A, which is currently tabled, and that was some amendments were made at our last meeting, and then it was tabled. So I would propose that we remove that from the table first, and then we can introduce any amended version or amendments.
I move to remove Resolution 23-61A from the table.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Mr. Waters. Any discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call on a motion to remove from table?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so we are back on the table, and we have Resolution 23-61A before us. We also have another document in our packet that is a revised resolution proposed by Mr. Waters, according to the title.
Mr. Drescher, please help me if I stray on this motion, but I'd like to motion to replace the resolution 23-61A with the revised resolution that's in the packet. That's resolution 23-61, establish an advisory ad hoc committee to develop policy recommendations for the maintenance, preservation, and replacement of trees within the city's urban forest.
So if I may, the way I interpret that is a motion to amend to replace the presented 23-61A with the revision that has been provided as well. So it's replacing what you've received as 23-61A with the revised version that is in front of you as well.
Second.
Okay, motion to amend and replace 23-61A by Mr. Waters, seconded by Ms. Quidnow. Okay, Mr. Waters, you want to tell us about your revised proposal?
Sure. The revised motion was developed with the help of city staff to address the concerns that were related to the first version. The intent is to work together to preserve our natural resource, which beautifies and defines our community, that being the trees. Mature trees, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions or discussion on the revised proposal?
Just to clarify for everyone,
Oh, yes.
since the original attachments weren't perhaps titled clearly, the revised one, the motion that's on the table, the 23-61 that was included in your packet, was based off of the original 23-61, so it does not include any of the changes that were included in 23-61A. I just wanted to be clear about that, so everyone knows what the starting point was for those revisions, and then what would not be included with what's on the table before you right now.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion? Mrs. Bishop.
I'm going to move quickly. I appreciate the rewrite and the willingness to address a lot of the issues that I think people, myself in particular, brought up last week, but also other members of the council. This addresses a lot of my concerns, so I just have two, I think, brief edits. And I'll describe what they are first, and then we can go from there. So the first part really is all the way down in section 7. And it's the language about right in the middle, that the committee shall dissolve upon the issuance of their final recommendations. And my concern and consideration would be to strike the word issuance and make this read that the committee shall dissolve automatically upon the receipt and acknowledgement by the city council of their final recommendations. That way the committee can't just say, hey, we gave you recommendations, we're done, on their own.
So could you just repeat that language?
Sure,
change?
and I'll just go ahead and make the motion. So I move to amend section 7 by striking the word issuance and by adding the language, a receipt and acknowledgement by the city council before the words of their final recommendations. And Misty, I can read that back in full for you if you would like. So the
One more
full
would be great.
Okay, the full sentence in the middle of section 7 would read, with my amended language, the committee shall dissolve automatically upon the receipt and acknowledgement by the city council of their final recommendations on all items. I'll
second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Mr. Fields to amend Section 7 of the proposed Resolution 23-61. Any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mrs. Bishop, you said you had another item?
I did, and I'm looking at it now, and I think it's fine, so I won't mess with it. Thank you.
Mrs. Quidnow, was that a? Oh, okay.
Just have an itch.
I have a couple comments, and then I might make an amendment. Thank you, Mr. Waters, again, for preparing this proposed amendment, and I appreciate particularly the updates that provide a clearer scope and specific timelines, and then also I think it's important to clarify the advisory-only role of the committee. We got a little hung up last time on, what level of authority we were giving the committee, so I think it's important to address that. The preservation of mature trees and the beauty of the mature trees that we have in our community is very important to me, as is public involvement, and I'm really impressed by the enthusiasm and the passion of all the citizens who have been asking us to take steps to protect our mature trees, and I think we can really gain a lot by including citizens in our policymaking. I also care very much about our strategic priorities, and one of them is retaining quality staff. And for that, I think we have to give our own staff clear priorities so they can accomplish the work that we ask them to do, and that then we need to support them when they implement the policies that we set. Another strategic priority that we have is to use our citizen boards to get policy input. So as I'm looking at all of this, I'm trying to think about what's the best way to move forward on this issue, and I think it's a very important issue, and I'm really glad that the council wants to work on it. I think we struggled last time with identifying, what is the problem, and what is the scope of the problem going to be? So what is the policy issue that we need to address? But I also think we have a second issue, which is, what process are we going to follow to address that problem? So last time, when we talked about what is the problem, we adopted amendments that resulted in 23-61A that focused the scope on looking at removal of healthy mature trees during street reconstruction projects and street and utility projects. I think that's a really critical issue. It's very timely that we can address it by next summer so that we can apply it in the next street design. For this committee to be successful and timely, I think we should be returning to that narrowed focus rather than the broad focus that remains in this new proposal. But the other thing that I'm thinking about is, what process are we using to solve this problem? And we've had a number of citizens in our community that have been advocating for an ad hoc committee, but that's not the only way that we can increase public involvement. I think there are a lot of ways we can develop policy options. It starts with, we can just ask staff, hey, here's the problem. Please work on, give us some options for solutions. We can ask one of our existing boards to work on a problem. We can require a survey or a public hearing or do a community workshop. So there are a lot of ways that we can incorporate more public involvement. So I'm, again, really been thinking about this a lot and trying to think about what is the best approach to make sure that everyone can be successful and engaged. And to me, that requires balancing. So it's balancing the positive aspects of having citizen involvement and people who are very passionate about this particular issue, but also with using our staff resources and boards efficiently. So Mr. Fields commented last time about, we want to make sure we're not second guessing our technical staff. We want to make sure that we're, how is this going to work with our Public Works Board and our Parks Board responsibilities? There seems to be some overlap here. So when I think about the balance, I feel like this committee would definitely allow folks who are passionate about this issue to have more involvement in recommending policy. But I think it is labor intensive for our staff to have to manage another committee. They're already working on a number of parks and natural resource priorities. We've talked about a number of them this evening, and Sandy Beach redevelopment and lake water levels and the mill pond. And I want to make sure that we're not adding another responsibility onto our staff that is going to make it hard for them to meet the other priorities that we've already given them. I'm also worried that we're sidestepping our existing boards. We have appointed volunteers who have expertise in looking at infrastructure projects, looking at parks, and looking at the master street tree plan. We know that our forestry director is already in the process of updating the master street tree plan, and I'm concerned that giving this committee till next year in December is going to delay the completion of that. Well, it would give more citizens the opportunity to be involved. It's that feels like that's an unnecessary delay. Another thing that I've thought about is that by city ordinance, it's the purview of the Parks Board to advise the City Council on trees, shrubs, and vegetation within all parks. So I see that that's recognized in this resolution by saying that some of the review needs to be submitted to the Parks Board. But again, I feel like that there's some additional overhead with this committee that I'm trying to weigh that balance of is the additional time that we're going to be asking our staff to spend on this worth that balance. So I guess the bottom line for me, I'm not really in favor of creating an ad hoc committee when I feel that we have existing committees that can do this work. If we want to move forward with this, I would propose to amend Mr. Waters' resolution to do a couple of things. One is to narrow the scope back to what we had at the last meeting, where it's focusing on maintaining and preserving healthy, mature city street trees during street and utility projects. We had a majority of the the council that voted to go in that direction. And I think that would help the committee be successful because they could focus their attention, complete the work by next summer. We'd have to change and I've got a draft amendment, we'd have to change the committee name, add the references to street and utility projects, remove some of the tasks that they would do, but I think that that would be a very doable scope that an ad hoc committee could complete. One other thing, which is really minor, is I would propose to change, let me just double check this section here, Section 3 for the procedure for the city council ratification, to have the city manager simply forward all the applications to us, rather than having the city manager pick who the 5 should be, and we're not giving him any criteria in this resolution for how he would pick them. So I feel like that would be something that would be better to come to us, to choose 5 members from all the people that apply. So that was my speech. I guess I have a draft amendment, but I guess I'd like to get a sense of if people are interested in going in that direction and narrowing this, primarily to narrow the scope of this committee.
Ms. Curler?
Yes, Ms. Gwynna.
Would it be appropriate to ask Director Schreiner to speak to this, since it's mostly his section, his duties? I would love to hear from him what his thoughts are on this.
Certainly, I think that we can do that if there's no objection. Mr. Schreiner, you've waited this long? You might as well come up to the podium. Do you have a specific question for him, or do you just want him to comment on the proposed resolution?
Actually, I'd like to have some feedback from you about what Ms. Curler just said.
I absolutely agree with Ms. Curler as far as limiting the scope slightly on the, I suppose, amended resolution for the most part. I feel like I necessarily haven't been given the opportunity to share the findings that we have done so far as moving forward with the Master Street Tree Plan. I feel like there's already developed best management practices as far as tree protection zones within areas. There are already multiple municipalities that already have vastly superior tree ordinances and master tree plans that do take into account tree protection zones and proper management of them within their plans and ordinances. And then I think we also need to take a look specifically at a standardized process on how we want to move forward with the priorities within street construction projects. And I feel like we haven't necessarily been given that opportunity to do that, especially with College Street being kind of the flagship issue behind this, or the thing that's really started that. I think that's not necessarily a good comparison of how we can move forward with street construction projects and how we can, I suppose, include the trees within that process to when they necessarily weren't included so in the past. So I feel like we haven't necessarily been given the stab at this so far to actually do it internally, city staff-wise.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Schreiner? Thank you. So I do have some draft amendments. Again, I guess I would like to get a sense of if there's a couple of council members that would be interested in narrowing the scope, and then I could walk through the amendments. If that doesn't seem like that's going to be supported, that I don't need to take the time.
I would support narrowing the scope for number 4 and just striking recommendations regarding changes to the master street tree plan, because I see that specifically as Mr. Schreiner's job. And I don't think necessarily an ad hoc committee needs to delve that deep into the plan. To the extent, though, that they are reviewing and making recommendations as to the city code regarding trees, which specifically talks about how trees are replaced and maintained in regard to road work also, I think that needs to be left in there.
So saying item 2 needs to remain in there?
Yes, and then I would probably support striking item 4 to narrow the scope a little bit. But here's the balance. Do I completely believe that our staff can do this job if we ask them to? Yes. Has there also been an outpouring of a public commentary and wanting to be involved? Yes. Do we always see that? No, not at all. So I would love to get our public involved too, for something that they can get their hands on, get involved, and have a direct say in something that affects their streets, their property values, and where they live. And so from that perspective, I do think that this should probably be an ad hoc committee.
Any other thoughts on that issue? Based on that feedback, I'm sorry, Mr. Waters.
I'm sorry. On the narrowing of scope, I know that we have a lot going on with the trees down in the Sandy Beach area as we move through our projects, and that'll become a point of interest. So I did want to include the scope of the park trees as well for that reason, because it's an upcoming project that we'll be addressing probably in the next decade.
Right. Well, are you referring to number 3, Mr. Waters? Because I was okay with that. And then that also goes to the Parks Committee as an intermediary, which is also supported in our city code.
Right.
I'm okay with keeping number 3.
I also support the striking of number 4.
Okay, hearing that discussion, I'll make a motion to amend 23-61 to, I think there's just a correction, to revise section 1, item number 3, to change the term Parks Committee to Parks Board, and then to strike item number 4.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
Ms. Curler, did you intend to include your motion changing the appointment authority?
I will do that separately. But thank you for keeping track of that. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so roll call vote on the motion to amend 23-61 to change the phrase Parks Committee to Parks Board in section 1, number 3, and to strike section 1, number 4.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, thank you. So then, as I mentioned before, I think my recommendation would be that we just ask the city manager to collect applications and present them to us, and that then the city council would make a decision on which 5 members to select. So I think a revision to section 3 would be in order, so I'll make a motion and try to read this out. So I move to revise section 3 of resolution 23-61. So starting with the sentence that says, on the second regularly scheduled city council meeting after the passage of this resolution, it would read, the city manager shall present all applications to the city council, who will select 5 members to serve on the committee, period. And then retain the rest of that section.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, seconded by Mr. Waters. Any discussion? Okay. Can we have a roll call vote on the proposed amendment to revise section 3 to have the members of the committee selected by the city council?
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, is there any further discussion or
I have a
recommendations or
question.
amendments? Yes.
Since there's been motion 23-61, 61A, newly revised, and then 2 amendments to that motion, I'd just like to be clear about what we're titling this at this point, just for everybody's sake. I'd suggest motion or resolution 23-61AA or 23-61B, something that's just distinct and away from kind of the past effort here.
Okay, well, why don't, if people are okay, why don't we call it B, 23-61B? And that would include, it's basically Mr. Waters' resolution with the 2 amendments that have been made this evening, and any others that might come up before we're done.
Does that require a motion or anything?
I don't think so. I think it's clear. It's on the record. Missy,
Okay.
do you agree with that? You're okay?
I agree with that. I don't think it needs anything additional. We typically label things with an A after an amendment. So this would be appropriate to go to the next letter.
Perfect. Thank you.
One other issue I guess I'd like to just get some clarification on, and whether it needs a language change or not, I don't know. So in section 1, number 1, we ask for recommendations. We ask the committee to develop recommendations regarding engineering specifications, et cetera. And I know at our last meeting, we talked about costs, and there is another reference in here about taking into account costs. But what I would hope to see from this committee is that we would receive a series of, or that they would consider a series of options and the associated costs. So there could be a wide range of costs that would do a greater or lesser job of protecting mature trees, but I think we need to know if we're going to be recommending a policy change, what those costs would be. So can we assume from the way this is written that that would be a part of the work product back, or was that your intention, Mr. Waters, or do you think we should make a language change just to make sure that's clear?
That's my intent, yes, but we can modify, we can add the economic into it somehow.
Section 2 does say the committee shall consider the cost. I was comfortable with it from that perspective.
Okay, and again, I just want to make sure we're clear that then we get, that we get that cost information with any recommendations that the committee would have for us.
Yeah, it's pretty laid out in section 2. It's not in number 2 of section 1, but it is in section 2.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion or proposed amendments to what we are now calling Resolution 23-61B? Okay, I'd just like to make one other comment. I'm not going to propose an amendment, but Mr. Waters, I really appreciate you taking the time to develop this issue. I'm glad that we had more time to think about it, because I think we've all had a little more chance to learn more about what our forestry program does and what our ordinances say. I particularly appreciate the language at the end of section 1 that really emphasizes what the committee is not to do with respect to city employees. And I know that emotions have run really high and people have lost, beautiful trees adjacent to their homes, and that's been very disappointing to people. And there certainly is room to do better. But a comment that I heard from one of our city arborists has really stuck with me, and he said, we take no pleasure in cutting down healthy trees. And I really think it's important that this committee, I think, can hopefully reestablish some trust between the community and the city staff, because I think our staff have implemented the policies that we've given them. And it's not fun to cut, I'm sure it's not fun to cut down a healthy, mature tree, but if those are the plans that the Public Works Board recommended and the City Council approved, and that's what we've asked them to do. And so then they're the face of, the emotional feedback. So I'm really hopeful that the work of this committee will also just help improve understanding between community members and our city staff, and hopefully repair some of those bridges.
That wording made it under this resolution because of city staff helping to steer some of that wording. And I do agree totally with what you just said, Ms. Curler. And it extends past trees. It extends to dam management. It extends to other issues within the city that people need to be respectful of staff, and it needs to be accepted by the community that the city staff is trying to do the right thing for the city at all times.
All right, any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, let's have a roll call vote then on Resolution 23-61B, establishing an advisory ad hoc committee to develop policy recommendations. Whoops, let me make sure I'm reading the right one. About policy recommendations for the maintenance, preservation, and replacement of trees within the city's urban forest.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, 10 minutes left. See if we can get it done. Next item is Resolution 23-65, which is a budget amendment for Street Department truck procurement, and our Street Department staff are still here. Can we get a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 23-65, authorizing the city manager to direct the treasurer to amend 2023 capital budget.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Quidnow, seconded by Mr. Fields. Drake.
I would invite Director Myram to comment on the presentation that's included in your packet, and then answer any questions you may have about the implements. And Mark Yandre, our streets foreman, is here as well to answer questions on the item.
Welcome. Thanks for being here so long. I think the first meeting you joined us, it was also a long one, so.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to watch the process. I did put together a packet with my recommendation for this amendment and for this purchase. I was not part of the procurement procedure on this for most of it. This happened before I got here, but in the time I have been here, I do see the value for the city in making this amendment and this purchase. I would like our street department foreman, Mr. Yandre, to speak a bit more on the procedure that was followed. He could give some better insight of why we went this route. And then I could add, if you like, on top of the packet, why I think the city is getting a better value this way.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Mark.
Well, I guess I'll start with the history of our small truck fleet. In my 32 years of working here, we've purchased 2 new trucks. They were both 1-ton dump trucks. Every other truck in the fleet is hand-me-downs from either the water department, the light department, or the wastewater. We have signs riveted in the floors of the one truck in the packet there, because there's holes on both sides. Randy took it out for a ride the other day when he took the pictures, and he couldn't believe what the shape it's in. And it's not for lack of maintenance. All our vehicles get maintained. So when we started this process, Paul had in the budget for a 1-ton dump truck for $100,000. Well, a 1-ton dump truck is not going to cost $100,000. You probably could get one for between 60 and 70. So at our foreman's meeting, the water department was looking for a pickup truck, and the conversation started that we could probably spend this money better by the street department buying 2 pickup trucks. So I was tasked to go out to Badger, work with them through the state-funded truck system, which means we do not have to go out for bids. They follow the state plan. And the salesperson I was working with, she was going to look for 2023s because they did not have them on the lot. She found one 2023 with a long box, which was more beneficial for the water department, so he took that one. So she continued looking for 2023s, and she could not find one. So she placed an order for 224s. They're 3/4 ton, heavy duty suspension, quad cab with the short box. They came in due to the lack of the state plan being less for 2024s than they were for 2023s. The first quote she gave me was $48,000 a piece. So now this one came back in at a little over $51,000. Okay, so we went over by $3,000 on our capital budget. We also saved some money though on that because we would have had to put bed liners in them, spraying bed liners. These came back with bed liners already in them, so that's saving us $550 a truck. These trucks are probably a $70,000 truck, and we're getting them for $51,000. If I could buy one of them today for $51,000, there'd be one sitting in my driveway. These trucks will be here long after Randy and myself are gone. They'll easily get 20 to 25 years, I would say, if the maintenance plan keeps going the way we do it. So it's.
I would just add, I have talked to Sam about it, and we have accrued enough interest that it won't affect the bottom line of the budget. We won't have to it's not like we'll be going to the bank and asking for a higher loan for it. So we won't take out more debt, I guess, to cover the additional cost. It'll be covered through the interest that we've accrued while the money that we have borrowed is within our city funds.
Has the money been borrowed for these vehicles already with the capital?
The $100,000, yeah,
Was for the street department.
Yeah,
It was in our bond release? Okay.
Oh, and that's where the interest came from, that we've just been holding on to the money, waiting for the purchase. Okay.
Can I move to approve?
Okay, we actually have a motion and a second, so any other questions or discussion? Mrs. Bishop?
So I'm looking at the dealership right now. What's wrong with a 2022 Chevy Silverado 1500 for $41,000 with 354 miles? They've got about 2 of those.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if we go that route, we have to put it out for bids.
Yes, we would have, that specific purchase, we'd have to go out to bid or at least seek quotes on that transaction. The reason this is easy is because they're on the state bid list.
What requires bids for that vice what we're doing?
The cost incorporated in the purchase, it's over $25,000, so we have to seek separate bids. In this circumstance, the implement is included on the state bid list, so we can just go that direction. We don't have to seek bids for such a purchase.
So we just get to spend more taxpayer dollars because we don't have to go out for bid, which the bid process is supposed to protect taxpayers.
It is an allowed process under state law, and the state bid document, I can't remember what it's exactly called, is established. It's out there. A number of implements can be purchased in that manner, and the process can be utilized to avoid competitive bidding processes.
May I ask
Which competitive bidding typically drives the price down?
And that is an option that you can direct that this purchase goes through if that's the council's preference. In this circumstance, they have proposed the purchase of 2 trucks that are included on the state bid list that we don't have to go through that process on. So I think that's a fair point and a matter that your council can decide.
May I ask a question? What chassis is that, please? Is it a 3/4 ton, a half ton?
I'm just looking at the listing here. Chevy Silverado 1500 WT, regular cab, 4-wheel drive, automatic. Those are the details just on the front of the page.
Is it a 1500?
It's a 1500.
Okay, that's only a half-ton chassis.
Okay.
And when we start pulling our trailers and stuff with rollers and other equipment on them, the lake department found that out. They bought half-ton, and they were pulling the vac trailer and stuff like that, and they were having chassis problems.
Okay, so you are pulling trailers with these. Got it.
Yep.
Going to 25.
Yeah, that's why we went with a 3/4 ton heavy-duty chassis.
And then I noticed in the pictures that you provided, there's I'll call it an equipment box in the back of the bed. Are you able to transfer those from the trucks? Do you buy new ones? And what's the cost?
We wouldn't need to use them. We'll be able to keep, like for the truck that I will be using, we will be able to have the level for setting up road projects, all the stuff, the laser level that shouldn't be in the weather and that can be inside the truck, other locating equipment, things like that. And then if we're going to training someplace, instead of taking 2 people, we got 8 people going. You're taking 4 trucks to training sometimes. And now we can get them all in 2 vehicles.
Okay, so it helps me understand this purchase and the difference of what we're towing and actually using the vehicle for, so I understand that. What I don't like hearing, and I actually never want to hear again, is we've not bought new trucks in a long, long time, and we want something new for once instead of a hand-me-down. I don't accept that as proper argument.
Well,
So.
it's not, I just wanted to let you know what we had in our fleet. I wasn't making that the argument.
And I'm not necessarily saying you were, but that's certainly what it sounds like. And definitely when other people hear that, that's not an argument that I would ever support.
I'm not making that argument. I'm just, letting you know the shape of the vehicles that we have that are, even our utility truck, there's signs riveted in the floor and that. So it's, the trucks we do have in our small fleet have paid the city over 100 times.
Is there any further discussion or questions for Mr. Yandre or Director Mayram? Okay, if not, can we have a roll call vote, please, on Resolution 23-65, which is authorizing the city manager to direct the treasurer to amend the 2023 capital budget?
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion
Thank-
passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I would note that we are at 10:30. I don't think there is anything in our ordinance that requires us to adjourn at 3.5 hours, but we have one item left. We've saved the best for last. So if there's no objection, I'd like to proceed and allow the city manager to present his 2024 proposed budget.
Okay. Late today, you would have received a memo from me. A hard copy is being handed out now. It would be in your email inbox, and we did also add it to the website for the agenda.
Mr. Daly, Mr. Fields had to step away for a moment, so I'm wondering, do we want to just have a motion for a 2-minute recess?
I move for a 3-minute recess.
I'll second.
Not to.
All in favor? Raise your hands. Okay, so that's 4-0, and Mr. Fields has stepped out, so we'll come back in just 3 minutes.
Sorry to steal your thunder there, Mr. Daly.
But save your speech. All right. So we are back on the record, and we're on Agenda Item K, presentation of the 2024 City Manager's proposed budget.
I'm pleased to submit the city manager's 2024 budget proposal. The budget as presented is balanced and represents a significant investment in public safety and the city's employees. The budget includes $196,000 in additional funding for EMS, ensuring the community receives reliable paramedic level 911 ambulance service. The budget also includes funding for an additional full-time police officer beginning April 1st, 2024. This will return the department to its pre-2008 levels and provide the department with additional investigatory and patrol capacity. Finally, this budget invests in the compensation of the city's employees. In early 2023, McMahon Associates presented a report showing the city was out of market across the organization. This has been reflected in the turnover of the past year. Since December of 2022, over 30 employees have left the organization due to retirement or resignation. This places strain on the organization while attempting to maintain service levels and the administrative burdens of filling those vacant positions. It is my hope that the compensation adjustments in this budget and continued investment in our employees' future years will stabilize this situation. I would like to thank each department head for their work on the development of the 2024 budget, with special thanks to Finance Director Sam Bell. We are available to answer any questions, and I believe typically we would schedule work sessions following the initial presentation in order to discuss certain aspects of the budget in depth. As in last year, I would invite the department heads to be present for those, and we can continue through that process.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. So we have a memorandum that summarizes what you just described and highlights of the budget, and we have the proposed budget that was included in our packet. I would suggest that we schedule 2 work sessions, and if we get all of our questions answered and discussion and direction in one, we don't have to have them both, but perhaps we could have a doodle poll or something like that to schedule 2 work sessions. I know in past years, we've tried to schedule them at 5:30 with some food, and so it doesn't get to be too late. Would that be okay with people? Is 5:30 a time that people can get here? Yeah. Typically, depending on the day? Okay, so does that make sense to you, Drake, oh, Mr. Waters?
Can I get a quick question on the record?
Yeah.
I see that that the way the accounting's being done here is a little bit different than the previous year. The debt service is been brought down below the bottom line. Can I get a explanation of why that change has occurred?
Per request of the council, after the financial statement presentation from Hawkins Ash, we were dinged for not having debt service. So I was instructed to create a new debt service. So that's why the debt, you'll see some debt service at the end of the general fund with nothing in 2024 because it was already budgeted in 2023, so I couldn't change it. Starting in 2024, the debt service will now be in effect, so we don't get dinged on our audit.
Okay. So it shows a big difference on the top line as far as the revenue from property taxes, for instance.
Correct, because in prior budgets, the debt levy revenue and the regular levy were combined as the total tax increment received.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Okay, well then we'll just look for some correspondence from city staff to schedule those work session dates here coming up in, I don't know if we'll get one in September, but probably in October. Okay, so future agenda items, recommendations. From tonight, we will have this wasn't the first reading of the budget yet, so we would have a first reading of the city budget, yes? At the next?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Will we have a first reading of the city budget at the next council meeting? Is that would be the next step?
It's possible.
Okay. tonight was not a reading
No,
of the
it
budget?
was
Okay.
not. We'll be putting together the official documents for the ordinance. If we didn't have it, then we would probably need to have one meeting where there's two readings of it, which I know we prefer to avoid. So we may have it on there just so that we can continue through the procedural steps of it and that it's presented to the public for each of those meetings. So that will be, yes.
Okay. So we'll have some budget item on our next agenda. Then we have the second reading on the Brookstone Drive parking ordinance. I believe there's the Heartland Initiative presentation on affordable housing. They'll make a presentation to us. Rock Lake water levels, ideally, you'll be able to have some staff recommendations for us on that. Is there an entertainment district proposal that, are we going to be hearing that sometime?
Not yet.
Okay, so that's out in the future.
We're in contact with Legendary Lake Mills, though.
Okay. And then just a reminder for our second meeting in October, that's going to include a closed session with the council only to discuss the annual city manager performance review, and a reminder to submit your individual reviews to me by October 1. So that's a couple weeks from today.
Since he's present and he'll have to commit to being here that night, I also intend to have a resolution honoring the service of Mark Yandere to the Lake Mills Fire Department, of which on September 30th he will be retiring from.
Okay, so that'll be next time.
We're going to make you do a speech, Mark.
We'll try to get that in before 10:30. All right, are there any other suggested agenda items from council members? Okay, hearing none, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.